Thank you for listening to The Real Deal with Damian Adams. This is Real Sports Talk for the real sports fan, and I definitely appreciate all you real sports fans who are listening right now. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please do me a huge favor and leave this podcast a 5-star rating. That 1, 2, 3, 4, that 5-star rating review will definitely be appreciated. If you're listening on any other platform, it could be iHeartRadio, Podomatic, Google Podcasts, wherever. Please share from that platform so that your friends and family can find the show, listen to the show, love the show, and then they can share the show. I'm trying to get this podcast to the highest levels of podcastivity, and I need your help to get there, so I would truly, truly appreciate it. Got a very special episode today. Got my main man in the building with me. I've said it before. I'll say it again. He's no longer a guest. He is family. Came in, redecorated. He got stuff in the background, ready to go in the room. He got a room set when he comes here. Like, he's family to the podcast. He is one half of the Sideline guys. He also is the host of the MMA Archive podcast as well. My man, Chris Negron. What's going on, Chris?
What's going on, man? I'm doing good. I love the intro. I'm at home, like you said. I got a little too comfortable though. I try to light up the blunt. Mrs. Adams told me to, hey, go outside with that. So I did just that, but I came right back in and now it's time to go. I'm ready to go as always.
Hey, as long as you respect the rules, you're always welcome, bro. You're always welcome.
Yes,
And
sir.
we got a lot to get into today. So, like I normally do, we'll do the winners and losers from this week in football. Normally, we come to you right after Monday Night Football, but I'm not going to lie to you. I had absolutely no interest in the Steelers versus Colts game. So, we're actually coming to you right after the Pelicans played against the Thunder. If you're not familiar with Chris, he is an Oklahoma City Thunder fan. I'm a Pelicans fan. Just happened to work out that they played each other on the night that we were doing this podcast together. Pelicans pulled out a close one in a game where, man, SGA, man, he's somebody who, if the Thunder can get good, he could be an MVP candidate in a couple of years. Like, he's that legit when it comes to scoring the basketball, making plays for his teammates. And he's a monster, man. But we were able to pull it out. Zion was able to do some things, and Herb Jones, Alvarado had a good game. We were playing without CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram in this one. So it was a good win for the Pelicans, but the Thunder also showed up as well and made it a tough one as well. So you guys got a bright future there in OKC, man. How you liking this year for OKC so far?
I agree, man. I think we got a lot to be happy for. Obviously, it sucks that we don't have Chet out there. I feel like that would have gave us a better idea of where we're really at. I think treading water with the team we have now, although we got a lot of good young players that I think are going to keep getting better throughout the season. One thing that's been frustrating to watch all year, though, is obviously we got the dual threat of Jalen Williams, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's two guys with the same exact name. So multiple times I get frustrated with the light skin one. I'm like, damn, bro, what's going on? But then I'm like, keep the other one in.
Yeah.
So it's funny dealing with that little quirky thing. You don't often see two guys with the same name on the same team, but I'm liking what I'm seeing out of the young guys. The only thing I don't like is obviously when Shea goes to the bench, it gets a little weird, right? I want to see them stagger Dort a little bit more so that he's on the floor when Shea isn't. Because I feel like although they have a lot of great chemistry, having that primary ball handler on the floor that could really get things going in the offense, I think could help. Um, a lot of people hate on Pokasevsky. I love the dude. I think he's all heart. He reminds me of Frankie Edgar out there. Like, no matter who he's guarding, he's gonna look small. Like,
Yeah.
whether he's guarding a small forward or a shooting guard. But I like his heart out there. So I like what we have. I think really setting guys into their role throughout the rest of this year, and then working towards being an actual team next year is where I'm at. So.
Okay, no, I definitely can see that. As far as the Pelicans, like what I'm seeing so far this year from us, beating the teams we're supposed to beat, and when we're fully healthy, I think we can play with any team in the league. When we have our big three of CJ, BI, and Zion out there, along with the giant that is Jonas Valanciunas, he looked really big in this game against you guys for sure. But when those four are out there, and Herb Jones being a good defender. That's one thing that really stood out about this game. SGA was giving Herb Jones issues. Herb Jones is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. And we saw that down the stretch when they had that big charge that he was able to draw against SGA. But he's one of the best in the league. And for SGA to be able to get past him and draw fouls all game long just shows you how special he is. So bright future for both teams, man. I'm looking forward to it. And we'll have more basketball talk at the back end of the podcast when we give you our top 5 NBA MVP candidates through the first quarter of the year. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our week 12 winners and losers. We're going to do our 3-quarter-ish review of the NFL season and give you our award winners so far through the NFL season. But first, let's start with something a little more serious, right? So last week, a photo surfaced of Jerry Jones when he was, some reports say 14, some say 15 years old, but it was 1957. And he was in Little Rock, Arkansas, or some part of Arkansas. And he was on what we would now say is the wrong side of a protest for segregation of a school, for a school to be desegregated, excuse me. There were Black kids trying to integrate the school and become part of a school that was all white at the time. And Jerry Jones is in the picture, in the background of the picture, but in the picture on the wrong side of it. And there's been a lot of takes given on it and a lot of criticism of the people who have given those takes, right? So from Jerry Jones' perspective, he did talk about it. He said that he was just a spectator. He was just basically saying he was being nosy. He just was out there to see what was going on. And from the picture, I can see that because he is kind of in the background, just kind of looking, not really in the uproar of it from the picture. Now, we don't know what happened that day, but from the picture itself, he does look like he could be a spectator just there trying to see what's going on, and he's 14. So I can definitely see a 14-year-old saying, let me just go down here and see what's happening and see what's going on. And then you have people like Stephen A. Smith come out and defend Jerry Jones and say that this is over 60 years ago from this picture, because Jerry Jones is now 80 years old. So this is 65, 66 years ago. And he's saying that we shouldn't judge him based on that. You've had players come out to his defense as well and say that, you know, Jerry Jones has been very good to them, Black players, and gone beyond just the owner perspective of it, right? You know, you're an owner, it's your job to sign the checks, pay the players, whatever. But Jerry Jones is going beyond that, especially Adam Pac-Man Jones. He came out and said that Jerry Jones changed his life. We know that Adam Pac-Man Jones went through a lot of troubles in the NFL. We said once he got to the Cowboys, Jerry Jones was who actually taught him how to be a man, actually taught him how to take care of his finances. Instead of just giving him the money, taught him how to take care of the money. And as an owner, he didn't have to do that. So I think that is something that should be, you know, brought into the conversation. But what is your thought on the overall, just, I guess, controversy of seeing Jerry Jones in this picture and the reaction to it from all the different sides?
Man, this is, like you said, just a hard topic to even get into, right? I think
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this too. But I guess my initial reaction is obviously uh, what the fuck moment, right? Like you're
Yeah.
initially like, what is that about? Not something you ever would want to be associated with, even if it's tangentially, as he's trying to say, like he was just there. But even then, something really disturbing about it. I think it really speaks to honestly the history of this country and all the things that are sort of at this day and age not really at the forefront of people's minds, right? But
Yeah.
that's in within this lifetime, right? That's
Yeah.
how recent these things are, and I think that's why whenever things like this come up, it's kind of mind-boggling, right? Because it feels uh like it's so long ago, yet it's like you said, only 60 years ago. So I think what really makes it troubling too is the outdated nature of like the idea of the owner, right? Like what it is to
Yeah.
be an owner. And then considering those kind of views, I think it all is very jarring. So I get the backlash, I get the outrage, and even as a spectator, it's just hard to sort of defend your position. So I kind of, not that I feel bad for the guy, but it's like, what do you even say, right? Like how
Yeah.
do you even go about handling this situation? I would say I sort of lean with taking into account those other stories and what that means for his character as of today.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, that was 65 years ago. I'm sure there's things that I said back on MySpace in middle school that I regret as well. So, those are all things to be considered. At the same time, though, it always is going to kind of leave a weird taste in your mouth, right? Like whenever you see him involved in anything at this point, it's just going to
Yeah.
be another added thing you have to think about. There hasn't been much controversy from what I remember about these kind of things with Jerry Jones. So um, just a weird sort of piercing thing that's hard to get out of your head, but at the same time I agree it's hard to take that seriously as well. So I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I'm curious to hear how you feel about it though.
Yeah, it's definitely just a weird situation. And I'm glad you brought up how all of us at 14 probably said or did something that we're not proud of today, right? And I'm 32. So when I was coming of age, this is the late 90s, early 2000s when I'm coming of age. And our views and the words we use towards the LGBTQ community definitely weren't what we use today in the way we view that community today. So I wouldn't want anybody judging anything I said back then, like an F word that rhymes with maggot that I might have said back then when I was younger and definitely wouldn't say now. I wouldn't want anybody to find there's no like tweet or anything like that, but just to find maybe an old video of me saying that word and be like, that's him. That's what he views today. Like, no, I'm a grown man now. I'm way different than I was at 13, 14 years old. So for me, I don't want to judge him by that. And he's way further removed from 14 than I am. So I hope that he's grown a lot from that, the same way I've grown since I was 14 years old. And you have to take into account the stories of the players that have come to his side and also other people have come to his side. Because Stephen A. Smith definitely got a lot of flack for coming to his aid and saying that he thinks, Jerry Jones is a good person, that this was 65 years ago. And in the Black community, whenever there is something like this, people want everyone to attack. We all have to be on one accord. We all have to say this guy's horrible and that he should be, reprimanded. And part of me gets that, especially after the Kyrie situation, because with other communities, it seems like when something is done that they are offended by, immediate action happens, right? Kyrie had to go and do a whole list of side quests to get back on the court after he, put that documentary out there. And it seems like when things happen to the Black community, it's an apology. It's I've moved on from that. I've grown, and then we move on. And it's a double-edged sword, man, because I do think that when it comes to those situations, most times I'm ready to accept an apology, right? Because some situations you see when a white player gets a new contract or they get drafted to the league, people do this weird thing where they'll go look up their old tweets, right? We see it probably once a year we'll see it, where somebody go look up somebody's old tweets and there's an old tweet of, some quarterback or some middle fielder saying the N-word when he was 13, 14 years old. And people are like, oh, this guy just got a new contract. And whenever I see that type of situation, I'm like, why didn't it come out before he was about to get paid? So now you waited until he was about to get paid to bring this out. You didn't really care. You just wanted to bring this out now because he's in the news. And I'm not going to judge that person the same way I was talking about myself. I hope that people don't judge me because I said that I admitted saying the F word back when I was a teenager and I wouldn't say it now, the same way I wouldn't judge those people for saying the N word back then. So I'm not going to condemn Jerry Jones for being there. And at 14, peer pressure is a big thing as well. So you never know the whole situation. And not to minimize it, but usually whenever you see movies like this, like Remember the Titans or any of these movies where races come together, there's always the one white guy who's peer pressured into being in that situation. It's like, guys, I really don't want to be here. I don't think we're doing the right thing. And all his friends are like, man, shut up, man, let's go. And he gets peer pressured to even being there. Jerry Jones could have been that dude for all we know, right? We don't know the exact situation. So for me, I do think we should give people a chance to grow and grace to grow because none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. So the people who are yelling from their high horse saying, condemn this dude, he's a racist and all this stuff. Come on, bro. It was 65 years ago and he was 14. So even if his views were messed up back then, doesn't mean that's his views now. That was his views 10 years after that or 20 years after that. So for me, I think that we have to give him the grace and say he was at a bad place at a bad time. And honestly, from the picture, his story kind of checks out that he was just there spectating, like being nosy. And, maybe that's a lesson here as well. Don't be nosy. Don't be going to situations. Don't be, going to situations that you shouldn't be going to just to see what's going on. Like just hear about it later on. So I would say don't condemn him. Give him a chance to grow. And like you said, he hasn't had too many situations where we thought Jerry Jones is a racist. You might think Jerry Jones is crazy. You might think that he's out of bounds. You might think he's a lot of things, but the only time I could think that he had kind of the situations when the whole Kaepernick thing happened, and he told Dallas Cowboys, "We're not kneeling. This team isn't kneeling. Anybody who kneels is going to be taken off the team, right?" And then Dak Prescott at that time got a lot of flack because he kind of was the leader who followed Jerry Jones and told the team like, "We're not going to do this." And a lot of people said Dak was a sellout and all that stuff. And again, being Black is already hard enough, and then you have to deal with if you say something that's not the consensus opinion of our community, then our community comes after you as well. And that's one thing we have to do as a better, as far as just our community be better at, is having nuance in these situations and not thinking that everyone has to think the same, or you're a coon, or you're a sellout, you're Uncle Tom, whatever phrase you want to use. So for me, use nuance in a situation. We hear Jerry Jones is a great person from all the players, not just because they got paid, but from personal stories from, like Adam Pac-Man Jones said, Dez Bryant, telling stories about how Jerry Jones helped change his life, and not just from the money perspective, but from a life perspective. So because of all that, I'm going to take all that into account and say that that was a very, very, very long time ago. And again, in the picture, he really could just be somebody being there just to be nosy and see what's going on. So I'm not going to condemn him for that.
I just think 100% the leash is non-existent, right? If
Yeah.
any other investigation like the Dan Snyder thing ever takes place, and there's anything that comes out of it, like 100%, there's no reason, like, take all that shit back and
Yeah.
fuck this guy. But I agree. It's a hard line to walk when you are being nuanced in a situation that quite literally is black and white, and it becomes
Yeah.
so polarizing because of that, that just even talking about nuance sometimes can get you under fire. So
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the reasons, I have this podcast and I call it The Real Deal, because we're not going to shy away from any issues. We're going to dive into the serious stuff, but we're also going to have some fun. And let's get into some fun stuff. Let's talk about the winners and losers from week 12. You know how we do this. We pick, it could be a coach, it could be a player, it could be a team, whoever, as our winners and losers. We do 3 each from the past week. So let's start with a winner. Who's your first winner from week 12?
Man, I'm coming out of left field with this one, but I'm all in. Give me Jacoby Brissett, the
Okay.
winner. Obviously, this is the last week, right? They needed to get
Yeah.
past this hump for Deshaun Watson to come back, and I hate that that's sort of the storyline of his season, right? Because despite even the defense faltering at certain points of the season, he was able to put together not only good numbers for a backup quarterback, but good numbers for a quarterback in the league. Like, there was never a QB controversy in Cleveland, right? So
Yeah.
I think he's got himself paid. Past the situation, whatever happens, he's going to end up getting a nice contract to be a solid backup for somebody.
Yeah.
Very productive, and getting a win like that against the Bucks in OT. I know it's a team game. I know the running game is a big factor as well, but people really underrate what it is as far as being a leader and what that means to your team. I'm looking at you, Zach Wilson. So my winner is Jacoby Brissett.
Oh man, nah, that was a very good pick. I watched that whole game, and their offense, whether for a lot, even though Nick Chubb was gaining yards, their offense was stuck in the mud for a long part of that game. Like, they started off, they came out hot, scored the first drive, had like a field goal after that, and then were stuck in mud until that last drive of the fourth quarter, and David Njoku made that crazy catch in the back of the end zone, 4th down. Talk about pressure and coming through in that situation to make that crazy catch in the back of the end zone, and then they end up winning in overtime. But like you said, Jacoby Brissett has made himself into a made man. He's going to be a solid backup, getting that Chase Daniel money. That Chase Daniel bag is what I call it. He's going to be getting that bag for a long time for being a backup and showing that he can come through in those situations. And that was a sneaky important win for Cleveland, I believe, because Cleveland now, if Deshaun Watson comes back and he's Deshaun Watson from 2020, the guy who led the league in passing yards, who had one of the highest QBRs in the league on a very bad Texans team, if he's that guy for this team, they can make a run. The next thing you know, they're going into the last week and they have a chance to maybe fight for that last spot in the playoffs. So I think this was a very important win and sneaky win for Cleveland. So I like to pick a lot of Jacoby Brissett. But you did take a little shot at Zach Wilson, which brings me to my winner, Mike White. Mike White balled out in this game against the Bears. Now, the Bears defense is not good, but it's still an NFL defense. And Zach Wilson has showed us that even against a bad defense, he's not going to do what Mike White did. Mike White, went 22 of 28 for 315 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Just absolutely balled out, and definitely secured starting for the next game, and may have secured starting for the rest of the regular season because of it. And I've been saying this for a while about the Jets. They don't need Patrick Mahomes. They don't need, you would want that, of course, but they don't need a Patrick Mahomes. They don't need Lamar Jackson. They just need a C-plus quarterback. Like a Ryan Tannehill would be a perfect quarterback in a Jets situation, because that defense is phenomenal. They have offensive talent. When the quarterback can get them the ball, you see how dynamic a Garrett Wilson is. You see how dynamic those running backs are. Like, they have skill. So my winner is Mike White for going out there and balling out and take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was so salty about that situation. Just to make a long story short, in one of
Mhm.
my dynasty leagues, I made a trade, right? Of course, we got to go. We always got to bring it here, right? But I made a trade where it was Deshaun Watson and I'm trying to remember the receiver, but there was a receiver in there for Damian Pierce, Zach Wilson, and a pick, right? So I'm like, yeah,
Okay.
this looks great. This felt great. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna get a good quality RB2, right?
Yeah.
And I'm good, right? Because I'm pretty deep at receiver, so I'm fine with it. And then literally right after I look, right, and this is what threw me off. I'm talking shit to you, Derek. Not the Derek you know. This is my cuz. This is
Okay.
why it hurts even more, right? It's your own blood. I look at his roster when I find out that Mike White is starting, and who does he have on his team? Mike White, right?
Wow.
So you knew something I didn't know, right? Like now I feel fleeced. So I was salty about this whole situation, seeing him go off after two. I legit was messaging him. I'm like, drop him. I'll send you 5 cash right now. This before the game, too. After the game, I'm like, man, I got no shot now. So shout out to Derek. You fleeced me. That was grimy. But 100% I could appreciate what it takes to literally come off the bench and do that. And I mean, everyone must be loving him as well. Like the whole
Yeah.
locker room is on his side 100% now. So shout out Mike White.
Yeah, for sure, man. Sounds like your cousin got inside information, man. Maybe he needs to be the, Adam Schefter or Woj. Yeah, here with the inside information. So now let's get to your first loser.
Oh man, getting straight into the gritty, huh? Straight into the gritty. Um, this is the biggest loser for the whole season, in my opinion. So it's only right we start off with them. The Denver Broncos, 2 weeks in a row, right? 2 weeks in a row that
Yeah,
they just found a way to lose against teams that on paper, this terrible, terrible Broncos team should have won
yeah,
against. And then they're coming up short 2 weeks in a row. They cut Melvin Gordon. He clearly wasn't the problem, right? There's still so many things that need to be figured out. And the weirdest thing about this situation, I think that bothers me is like, I don't really have a clear answer on what it is, right? Like you would think that they would be in a better position than the Jets are this season. They have a better quarterback. In my opinion, on paper at the start of the season, they had a better defense, right? So it's just so strange to see them consistently be this bad throughout the entire season while we see the emergence of teams like the Lions coming back and doing big things. Even though they ended up losing this week, the momentum was on their side. I just feel
yeah.
like this team is not getting any spark and they can't get any sort of momentum going. And I don't see it turning around. The Broncos are the biggest loser.
Yeah, man. And normally I'm never for firing a coach during or after their first season. I'm like, it takes, 2 or 3 years to really see, what a coach is about, unless it's just to the point where you're like, this guy has no clue. And it seems like Nathaniel Hackett has no clue on what's going on. And, maybe it's not his fault. Maybe it's a situation where he got offered this job and couldn't believe it and was like, yo, they just offered me the head coaching job with Denver. I'm about to take it. It's like that when you lie on your resume and they actually believe it. You're like, oh, okay, they're gonna put me in a management position. I ain't never done this job, period. But I'll take it. And I just had to try to learn on the job. That's what it seems like here. It seems like he got a job where he was a manager and he didn't do the entry level work to get there. And once you get there in this position, it's going to be exposed. And that's what we're seeing. He's being exposed for not knowing how to coach, how to manage the clock, how to hire a guy to manage the clock. Like those little things that you should do as a head coach. And Russell Wilson, I know that he was at the end of last season starting to show this downside, but I'm shocked, man. I'm not going to lie to you. I did not expect him to look this bad. Even if the coach is bad, you can still tell when a quarterback's good. Like we've seen situations where we've seen bad coaches, like even with Arizona, for example. Cliff Kingsbury isn't any good, but you still see Kyler Murray making plays, showing things, and even having successful years like last year where they made the playoffs. And great quarterbacks or very good quarterbacks can usually overcome their surroundings. And Russell Wilson, not only is he not overcoming it, he's part of the issue. And that's something that shocked me this year for Denver. So I definitely agree with you. They've been a loser for a long while this year, for sure. So now let me get to my first loser. Sorry to do this, bro. Got to go with the Baltimore Ravens, bro.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Got to go with the Ravens, bro. I thought for sure they were going to win this game. I do this thing where on social media I post like a 5-leg parlay, and I pick 5 games, and I put it. I got 5 on it parlay, and the Ravens are part of that. The Ravens were a part of that. They were favored by 3.5. I'm like, Jacksonville 3.5. They got this, and I felt real comfortable when you guys are up 19-10 with about 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I'm like, oh, this is it. They about to go ahead and, space this lead out. And next thing you know, you guys fumble in their red zone and they get set up for an easy touchdown. And then they get a right back and they get the field goal. It's like, oh man, okay. But then you guys take the lead again, up 27-20 with 2 minutes left in the game. I'm like, all right, they can close this out. Trevor Lawrence, he's not known for being clutch. You guys can close this out. And not only did they score a touchdown, but they got a 2-point conversion to win the game. And I just was in utter shock watching this game and the fact that you guys couldn't close it out. From your perspective as a fan who watches all these Raven games, because I've not seen every Raven game. I've probably watched like 3 or 4 this year. For you, when you watch this team, what is the most surprising factor about this year?
That's a good question. I would say the inconsistency of the line. And I know that sounds probably weird, but I think in a lot of games, I think the main talking point of our offense is how we don't have any receivers, right? That's what everyone always talks about. I think for the most part throughout the year, we've been able to get a lot of good production out of our receivers, even considering that it is a pretty depleted core. The last 3 weeks, though, I think there's been a lot of inconsistency with the line, and you just got to call it how it is, right? I still like what I'm seeing from our defense. I think in this game, in general, we sort of just got tired, right? And towards the end of this, and this is something that we've seen already, which is what is troubling for me, right? I feel like all of our losses have come in this exact gutting fashion where we're up at some point and probably by more than a touchdown, and then somehow it sort of slips away with the from us. I think the real big takeaway to really look at though is if our offense early on, and I'm thinking of those first half drives, if any of those field goals are a touchdown, we automatically aren't even in a conversation of losing this game. So I think those small moments of not executing and leaving an opportunity out there, we've shown that towards the end of certain games, we can get sort of taken advantage of. Let's just call it what it is. So you want to give yourself the best opportunity to not be in that position. And the fact that the offense has been sputtering a lot, you got to put the blame on where it's due, right? I think a lot of people are talking shit about Lamar too. I think it's not just the line. There's some decisions here or there that I definitely don't agree with. Either holding the ball too long or not getting rid of it at all when there's people that are open. Whatever the case may be, everyone's going to make their mistakes. I just think when it comes to executing on offense and finishing drives, I think the last 3 weeks have been a struggle. And our defense is going to show up every single game, even if we end up in a shootout game like this. There's always sort of standout plays for me that I could think of where it's like we can get a stop when we need it. So the fact that we keep falling apart like this towards the end of games is fucking frustrating. I still firmly believe that we got a case to be undefeated right now. But obviously that's not the world we live in. Just got to take it on the chin for what it is. I just hope after the 4th time you get the lesson, you fucking learn it. Like that's all I hope. Like literally it happens too many times now for this to be the same old excuse. So I would say right now our line is fucking us up. But I think finishing drives is going to be the story of our season.
Yeah, nah, that's a great point about early in the game. You guys kicked a lot of field goals. And what's so crazy about Justin Tucker, he came out for that 67-yarder outdoors. And I was like, they about to win this game. Freaking 67-yard out. I thought for sure he was gonna make it. And it happened to be just a little bit short. If that was indoors, I think he would have made it because that's how dangerous he is when it comes to his kicking game. But yeah, man, sorry I had to bring it, bro. But I watched that whole game and I was like, really like, I just couldn't believe like you guys just couldn't pull away. I felt like just eventually you guys are gonna pull away and get that 14, 17-point lead, and it just never happened. So now let's get to your second winner.
All right. Who should I go with first? I'm gonna go with the Niners. What is this? 4 games in a row, right? Since McCaffrey got there, they're just doing their damn thing, and it's not always pretty. It can't be with Jimmy G.
That was an ugly game on both sides. Yeah.
For sure, man, for sure. And I wasn't even trying to talk shit on your Saints. I was gonna leave it at that. I wasn't even gonna say much. But I agree. I feel like this team is gonna be gritty. They're gonna be grimy, and sometimes it's not gonna be the explosive game you want. But I'm just gonna keep saying it to whoever's gonna listen. Brendan Ayuk is that dude. Everyone always talks about Debo.
Yeah.
There's multiple plays during these games where I'm like, that's the guy you want, right? That's
Yeah.
somebody that I think you could get on a sneaky contract that could really be big for your team. So interested to see if they're able to keep him. I feel like what they have on offense is crazy, right? Like you insert any top five quarterback in that offense. And to me, it seems unstoppable. So shout out to the 49ers. I think when it comes to pound for pound, just teams, right? At the end of the day, every team is putting three different teams out there. And pound for pound across all three of those different teams, I think the 49ers have the best team in the NFL. It's just
Oh.
about putting it together. So I think they're going to be a challenge for anybody for the rest of the year, especially come playoff time.
For sure. I definitely agree with that part. There'll be a challenge for anybody because that defense is so dynamic. And even in the second half, when the Saints did make some adjustments, were able to move the ball a little bit, they were able to make sure we didn't finish drives. Now, part of us not finishing the drives is having Andy Dalton out there. But the other part of it was those guys hitting. Kamara had a play where he should have scored a touchdown. He got hit right at the 1 yard line, fumbled. And then our wide receiver had a chance to get it. And imagine as a Saints fan just being so frustrated watching our guys finally got to get in the end zone and then fumble. Our next guy fumbles it and 49ers get the ball. But it's been that kind of year for the Saints. It's just been one of the, like a year you just accept as a fan. You're like, it's not our year. It's not going to happen for us this year. And as far as for the 49ers, the only thing that did kind of gave me a cause to pause on them, the Saints defense isn't that good this year. It's decent. It's not like horrible. But the fact they only scored 13 points and the second half, they couldn't really do anything offensively. And it was like, really? You guys are like shut down by the Saints right now? And again, we had our player, a lot of our starters came back. Cam Jordan came back. But it was like, you guys shouldn't be shut down by us like that. I know our run defense is normally our strength, but it hasn't been our strength this year like it has been in past years. Like before this year, like the previous 3 or 4 seasons, we were top 5 in run defense every year. This year, we've taken a step back. And you're like, okay, since we're taking that step back, I expect this team, the 49ers, who are so dynamic with the run game, to exploit that and dominate. And they didn't do that. And then Jimmy G had a few plays where there was one big interception that was called back on a penalty that was a little shaky on the penalty call. But that was a horrible throw by him. And you still have that big elephant in the room. Do you trust Jimmy G to come through in those moments, right? That's the thing. They're going to be in every game. That defense is going to keep them in every game. But when that defense has a game where they're playing against a team like a Dallas this year or a Philadelphia, where those teams are going to be able to score the ball, what's going to happen when you need Jimmy G to come through and make those plays? I still don't trust them, but they definitely deserve to be a winner this week because they dominated that game. Our leading rusher was Andy Dalton. That tells you enough about how that game went for the Saints offense for sure. So speaking of running game, that's what I'm going for my next winner, the Eagles run game. They were so dominant against the Packers. Jalen Hurts had 157 yards rushing. Miles Sanders had 21 carries for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. Talk about just old school, smack you in the mouth football. Like we're going to run the ball. Now we might change up how we do it. We might try to use a little misdirection, a little, sleight of hand, but we're running the ball. And we're coming at you and you still can't stop it. I love that. I love that old school mentality. So shout out to Philadelphia in their run game for being able to do that. And we know that Jalen Hurts has improved as a passer as well. So if the run game is not working, they still have another anchor to go to in that pass game as well. So shout out to the Eagles in that run game.
Man, you got me jazzed up here. I wanted to try to grab this stat. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that was literally the second time, not just this season, but in the last 3 that he ran the ball more than 20 times. And you think that that's some crazy shit, right? Like where you should be getting him way more carries than that. I think especially this year has been a real big bounce back year from Sanders. I think even last year, Derek, my co-host, he's a big Eagles fan, and we were talking about whether he still has it or not, because there was a lot of times last year where not only was he not finding holes, but instead of running up in north south, he was running east west. He was finding his way out to the sidelines and
Yeah.
really losing yardage for them. So to see him really be reinvigorated, I'm a big fan of their line too. I love watching Jason Kelce do his thing. One of the few teams where I'm actually paying attention to the linemen, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time you're looking straight at the quarterback, but I agree. I think the Eagles are a dominant team. They're fun to watch, and in a shootout like that, kept their composure. So
Yeah. Nah, it's definitely they've shown that they could win in different ways, and you love that for a Super Bowl contending team. So now let's get to your second loser.
man, um, we might as well get into it because we already kind of talked about it, but it has to be Zach Wilson, right? There's nobody on the entire league that was more sad last week than the Cougar Slayer himself. Um, I I'm just disappointed in this whole situation because obviously um the big talking point was the interview where he wasn't willing to take accountability for those things on his own.
Yeah.
And for me, it kind of shined a light on something that I thought was kind of stupid, right? Like I think that culture, especially in today's day and age, like although I understand what it's about, right? Like this is a team game and it's all about the man next to you. It's not just about you.
Yeah.
But let's be real. In 2022, like that shit does not sell, right? Like
Yeah.
you in order to be a good QB, like I mean, in order to be a renowned QB, you have to be very, very good, right? But
Mhm.
on the other hand, I think certain people, if you have a certain personality, you could also shine, right? And I think that mentality of like, we got to be robots and be as boring as possible in these interviews just to save face for one another. I think it's a stupid mentality, especially as someone that graduated with a journalism degree. I just got to
Yeah.
say, interviewing people like that they're just so like shut off to like any sort of pumping their chest out there, right?
Yeah.
This is the inverse of that though. So although I disagree with the culture, I understand why there was a big outrage about it. But then when the backup comes in and does that, like you're fucked. Like like you lost all respect. And now there's no reason to think that you can be that guy again when we see what this guy's able to do. And I'm sure when they were speaking to Mike White, he's like, I couldn't have done it without my guys.
Yeah.
I'm sure he doubled down to make sure everybody heard what they wanted to hear. I personally didn't like the way this whole thing went down because I think once again that culture is a little silly in
Yeah.
2022. But at the end of the day, when the guy balls out like that, your season's over.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great pick. And I love your point about how we shouldn't expect these guys to be robots. And the guys who can balance not being a robot while also giving a quote unquote right answer are the ones who, we all fall in love with as far as, the media and stuff like that. And the thing is that mentality has trickled down from the pros to college to high school, right? I cover high school football here in Arizona. And when I interview a quarterback after the game, everything's very couldn't do it out my teammates. My O-line killed it for me. Like they're already, these are 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And they're already very, very trained. They're like I had a freshman the other day, man, who, looks like he's going to be a big shot. He's already like 6'4", monster arm. Looks like he's going to be the real deal if he stays healthy. And I interviewed him. I'm not expecting him to be a great interview. He's 14, right? I'm not expecting much from this. So I'm giving just little lollipop and questions and stuff. And he was just boom, boom, boom. I'm like, oh man, this dude's already been media trained. This is crazy. So when you're, covering high school, you see that effect already. You're like, oh man, this is already coming down. So I definitely agree with you on that. Like we should let these guys be themselves. But you also have to have an emotional maturity at that point where you can't say no, right? When the reporter asked that question, and honestly, the question, he probably didn't even expect to get that response, like a response that would go viral when he asked that question. He probably was like, oh, I need a quote for this part of my article. Let me just ask this and see what he says. And he said no. He was like, oh, okay. And like I've been in that moment too, where you just need a quote for a part of an article. You're expecting some generic answer just to put there. And you go and you're like, oh, okay, this is surprising. So I'm pretty sure the reporter was shocked by it as well. So we do need to allow grace for people to be themselves. But in that grace, in that, period of being yourself, you have to have emotional maturity and take responsibility for not performing well. Like it was obvious that you were sucking, my guy. Like you can't just go out there and they were winning. And maybe he thought because they were winning games that he was playing well, but hopefully they were keeping it 100 with him. That's a big thing too, where the people around him, the coaches, everybody keep it 100 with him. Like, yo, we're winning games, but we're winning in spite of you right now, my dude. Like, you have to step it up. You have to play better. So I wonder if anybody was keeping it real with him, because we see it sometimes we'll see it in boxing where they have a bunch of yes men around them and people aren't telling them the real thing. And once somebody does tell them the real thing or keeps it 100 with them, they go crazy and they're like, F this guy or F this woman because they actually told me the truth. So I wonder if that's that type of situation where he's not hearing the real deal until, after that interview or after that press conference. And that's when he finally heard it. And it was like, oh, I didn't know that I wasn't playing well. So you wonder if that type of bubble effect was happening. So there's a lot there that goes into that. So now I love that response right there. So for my second loser, I'm gonna go with the Seahawks defense. So the Seahawks, man, they came out and they shocked us this year, and everybody expected them to play bad, myself included. I was like, this is gonna be a rebuilding year. You just got rid of your franchise quarterback. You're bringing in Geno. Your defense is very young. This is a rebuilding year, and they came out and they shocked everybody and have been playing well up into this last couple of weeks. And against the Raiders have had all of this function, right? You got the quarterback crying and the coach who just looks like he don't know what he's doing either. It just all looks bad. You got all the talent in the world, but for some reason can't play 4 quarters of football. And then in this game, that offense looked unstoppable. They looked like the offense we thought they would look like when the year started, right? When you add Damian Adams to go along with all the weapons that are already there. And Derek Carr, who is a good quarterback. I've said it before when you're on the show. You can do a lot worse than Derek Carr. So you have Derek Carr, you're like, okay, this team should be pretty good. And Seattle allowed them to look like that. And Josh Jacobs, I know he's playing for a contract, but dang, he out there looking like Thanos against the Seattle defense. He had in that game 222 yards rushing, along with 74 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, he was absolutely dominating.
Game winner.
Yes, game like walk off 80-yard run in overtime. Absolute craziness, man. So I got to put the Seahawks defense in my loser circle for sure.
I agree with that, man. And especially when framed that way, like I feel like me specifically, have been giving a lot of credit to the Seahawks defense, in addition to their offense. And definitely last week was a boring, but I don't know. I don't know what it is about the Raiders, man. Like, I feel like whenever I watch them, you're watching a different team, like every single time.
Yeah,
and the fourth quarter comeback stats from the Ka. Shout out my guy Christian, RIP, man. Like, he told me back then, he's like, man, this guy, like, even though he's not in the right situation, like when it comes down to it and you need him to get you a drive, he'll do it. And I think he's definitely showing that. And I don't know what it is. I feel like this is more so the Raiders having one of those games than it is Seattle like imploding. But it's time to keep our eyes on, especially with Pete Carroll, and how they bounce back in the next couple weeks.
For sure, because they're no longer in first place in that division. They'll be fighting for a wild card along with the Washington Commanders and the Giants and the Cowboys down there. And it's rough, man. The Commanders look like a team that's going to be something to reckon with. And speaking of, you mentioned it earlier when it comes to like that chemistry and believing in your quarterback. Taylor Heineke's not that good, but for some reason the team believes in him and there's a chemistry there. And they know that he's a guy who's going to come through and fight for them. And now they're playing well. Carson Wentz is way more talented than Taylor Heineke, but for some reason, Heineke's working with them. Maybe the same thing with Mike White, maybe the same thing with Geno Smith, where those guys were guys who maybe weren't that talented or maybe didn't play up to that potential that we thought they had, and now they're playing up to it. And you're seeing that with the offense, but unfortunately, it didn't translate to Seattle's defense in this one. So now let's get to your last winner.
My last winner. I had a hard time picking this one. I felt like this week was a lot of this is what you should be doing, right?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna give some love to the Miami Dolphins. I think the fact that they're still in the lead right now, even though they're tied in the lead because they have the tiebreaker against the Bills in their division at this point of the season. I didn't think that was possible at the start of the season. So the fact that they've been able to be consistent, and I'll say it over and over again, I'll just keep admitting it, right? Tua is him. I was talking all this shit for a long time, and I was really questioning whether or not he would ever be able to show up to this capacity. And I think even during the midst of this run where we've seen that as a starter that he's able to will them to victories, I still kind of felt like, is it by committee? Is it the defense that's really, especially last season, like, is it the defense that's the reason why they're able to win these games towards the end of this? But especially this season, man, it's undeniable. Offensively, they got a spark that they never had. And it is all because of him, right? So I
Yeah.
think belief in the system is as well, and Mike McDaniel, everything he's doing over there is really what made the biggest difference for him. But got to give it up to the Dolphins. They're really dominant in a division that is probably one of the best in the entire league. So
Nah, that's a really good pick right there for sure. It's definitely not mad at that one. For my last winner, I'm gonna go back to Thanksgiving. Kirk Cousins in prime time, coming through. Gotta give him some respect for that. And for me, the whole Kirk Cousins thing, I feel like some of it's a little cheesy and not real. They put the chains on him on the plane and he's doing a little shoulder dance. Like, is that really Kirk Cousins? Is he really that down, or is he being just a goofy guy? And maybe he's just, him having a good time and being silly and going along with it. But part of it seems kind of performative. Maybe I'm wrong about that. We'll see. But some reason the teammates do like him, and he's able to, even after bad games, come through and perform well. And that's what you wanted to see from Kirk Cousins, if he was able to come back from that Dallas game and perform well after that. And you saw that immediately against the Patriots. And it started off bad, he had an interception. And I was like, oh, here come Kirk Cousins in prime time again. But he was able to overcome that and go 30 for 37, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns, and that one pick that I mentioned. So I got to give Kirk Cousins a shout out, for being able to come through in prime time on Thanksgiving. So that's not just any prime time. You're literally the only game on. People are, just fat and tired at that point. They watching the game, like you have everybody, all the eyes on you, and you came through. So shout out to Kirk Cousins.
and against a really good defense, right? A team
Yeah.
that just shut out Zach Wilson and took his job. Like,
Mhm.
it was definitely a performance I didn't expect. And hey, when the biggest thing I noticed about this game is it's a good life being Adam Thielen in the NFL, isn't it? Like, you're right across from Justin Jefferson. You're opening the end zone all the time. Like,
Yeah,
it's beautiful. So yeah, I agree. Kirk Cousins showed up and did what he was supposed to do. So you got to show some love.
for sure. So now let's get to your last loser.
Oh man, here we go. Tom Brady, get your ass over here, boy. Um, I I think I'm someone that makes it known. I like to hate on Tom Brady, right? Uh, many years of pain is what made me into the person I am now. Okay, but it feels good to see him out here taking L's left and right. This is another team that I still don't really understand why they're as bad as they are. I feel like he still gets the ball out so quick whenever I watch this team. Like, it doesn't look like a team that should be having offensive struggles. Like,
Yeah,
there's a lot of teams in the league that come nowhere near to running plays that quickly and that crisply. So you would think the sort of chunk plays and everything would follow, given that they're doing it the right way, right? But
yeah,
I just feel like this team, even though they're known for their defense, hasn't been as dominant as they usually have. So the offense really has been asked to step up. And it's so weird because I can't really point my finger on what's stopping them, right? I don't, I mean, the line has been a story throughout the entire year. Wirfs has that injury with his hand as well now. So even more of a question mark there. I just feel like they play in a certain way that even though they've had those line issues, you would think that they'll be able to figure it out at this point as well. So the fact that they're still taking L's against teams that at this point could be out of playoff contention is crazy. I mean, I definitely wouldn't have picked the Bucks to be out of the playoff picture at this point, and that's definitely where they find themselves now. So got to be the Bucks and Tom Brady.
yeah. The crazy thing is they can still, because the division is so bad, they can still make the playoffs and have a home playoff game, which I've been yelling for years should be changed. If you have a below 500 record, even if it's not below 500, if there's a wild card team with a better record than you when you win your division, winning your division by default shouldn't be rewarded with a home playoff game. And I've been saying this for years, and people's like, the only reason you say that is because the Saints lost to the Seahawks that year. Yes, that's what started it. That's that's where the opinion came from. But even now, the Saints somehow turned it around this year and won the NFC South, which because it's so bad, it's still possible. If we were able to do that, I still wouldn't be happy with the Saints getting a home playoff game based off just winning a bad division. So that's just a quick tangent. I think that should change. But Tampa Bay, man, like you said, that I thought for sure they were going to find a groove in this game. because once Cleveland got out to that quick lead, they were able to come right back and score. And I was like, okay, Tampa Bay's going to find something. Like you mentioned, that O-line is not able to really create anything for the running game. Tom Brady, he's not trying to hold onto that ball long at all. And with an O-line that's not really there, that's not protecting Tom Brady, who's not trying to take those hits, that's where you're getting a lot of throwaways, a lot of balls being short at people's feet, because he's not trying to hold onto that ball until that extra tick to get somebody open, that you see somebody hold onto the ball and the young quarterbacks willing to do that, to take that hit. Tom Brady's not trying to do that. And that's what you're seeing this year. You're seeing somebody who's not willing to take those hits, not willing to hold onto that ball for the extra tick, affecting the passing game. The play action game is not working as much because we're not fearing the run. Got one of the worst, running attacks in the league. So we don't fear the play action. It's not going to open up easy passing lanes. And they still have weapons, though. Julio Jones, even at this stage of his career, is still dynamic. Mike Evans is still that dude. Godwin is still good. So it's crazy to think that they just aren't good and they're going to be a team, even if they do get that NFC South spot, they're going to be a team that gets blown out by Dallas, the Giants, whoever it is that gets that 5th seed that plays them in that first round. So I'm with you, man. They're definitely up there for the loser for sure. For my last loser, we're going to stay in the NFC South. I talked about it a little bit earlier, my New Orleans Saints. Oh my God. It was just, it was so ugly, man. And usually, no matter how bad the season is, I'm locked in on the Saints, right? I'm always going to watch the Saints game and pay attention to it. But in that afternoon slot, you had Saints 49ers, which was horrible, but you also had Seahawks Raiders, which was a crazy game. You had Cardinals and Chargers, which was a really good game. So I was like, do I really have to be like loyal right now and watch the Saints play? And I kept going back to it just to see if something would change, but I was more tuned into the Chargers and Cardinals or to the Raiders and Seahawks, because the Saints, not only are they bad, but they're boring. That's like, like usually when you have a bad team, they give you something that's exciting, right? Like even this year with, let's pick out
Falcons.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah, Falcons. They're not that good, but they're exciting because their run game, Mariota being dynamic, they're exciting to watch. So when you look at the Saints, you don't get anything. At least with Jameis out there, you get something, right? I don't get the whole sticking with Andy Dalton thing. It makes no sense to me. And I mentioned earlier, Andy Dalton, our run game, because our passing game is so bad, they don't fear it. They're stacking up against the run. Kamara's not able to do anything. And now you have Andy Dalton leading you in rushing yards, which I don't know if that's ever happened in his career. So the fact that it's happened now at this stage is really bad. So yeah, I had to put the Saints in there as the last loser. Just I'm glad the Pelicans are good this year because I have nothing to cheer for in football when it comes to the Saints for sure.
I was about to say, man, like I wasn't even gonna do it to you, and the fact that you did it to yourself, like I respect the accountability, but damn, that it was deserved this week though. But literally, as I was looking through the list, I'm like, I'm not gonna do Damian like this on his own show. Like I can't.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you looking out for me, but when it comes to the Saints, when they're bad, man, I gotta hold them accountable. Like, and that was, whenever it's either Saints or Pelicans, man, I gotta hold them accountable. And this year it's the Saints that just, I don't know, man. Dennis Allen, I don't know if he's head coach material. Maybe he's a great defense coordinator. Like he's the last few years when he was defense coordinator was the best run of Saints defenses since back before, I was even paying attention to football. We had like the Dome Patrol in those days. Like this, so maybe he'll go back to that. I don't know, but I don't know if it's going to be. I think they're going to give him an extra year. Like I said earlier, I don't like the firing a coach after 1 year thing. Like you look at the Panthers, Steve Wilkes got fired after 1 year with the Cardinals. They brought in Cliff Kingsbury, who somehow failed in college, but then failed up the NFL coaching job. And Steve Wilkes looks like a guy who's like, okay, this guy can be a head coach. You just never gave him a shot. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like firing coaches during year one or after year one. But Dennis Allen, Nathaniel Hackett, Josh McDaniels, even though the Raiders did look good this week, there's three guys I can see, like, if you fire them after 1 year, I can see it. And I know the Raiders can't afford to do it, but if they had the money to do it, I can see them doing that and firing a guy after 1 year. So that was our winners and losers for week 12. So as we do whenever Chris comes on the show, that means that it's time to do our awards for this part of the year. So I'm interested to see how his awards have changed since week 8. Now that we're at week 12 and we're at the 3/4-ish point of the season. So let's go ahead and let's go from the bottom up, or I guess from coach of the year all the way through MVP. So let's start with coach of the year. Who is your coach of the year right now?
This is the one that I'm not touching for the majority of the year is going to remain the same, and that's Brian Daboll and what he was able to do with the Giants. I mean, I thought 100% that the Jets were going to be better than the Giants this season.
Yeah.
They've been right on par with each other throughout the entire year. Right now, the Jets have the better record, but um, I just I really feel like more so than Robert Saleh or anybody else, like you feel the difference since he's come to the Giants. So that's going to be my pick probably for the rest of the
Okay, I'm not mad at that pick at all. And hopefully the Giants aren't starting to come back down to earth. They've won a lot of close games this year. We talked about it earlier this year. They had a very, pancakey schedule, if you to put it nicely, to start the year. And now we're starting to see that rough schedule come in. And they still got to play, the Eagles, and they still got some tough ones up in their schedule. So we'll see if they're able to get through that and be able to turn the corner. But I'm gonna go ahead and go to Jets head coach. Give me Robert Saleh. When you look at what they've been able to do, and the whole Zach Wilson thing has added points for me. Because now we're like, we don't know if he was a locker room thing, if they were winning. They were already winning in spite of him because of the football field. But maybe they were winning in spite of him on the football field and off the football field with that defense. And now you bring in Mike Williams and you make the right decision, right? Because when it comes to, I saw Richard Sherman talking about this, how he hates that the fact that a guy was a high pick, they're going to get more chances than the guy who was a lower pick. When it should just be, can you play or can you not play, right? But with Zach Wilson being a second overall pick, he's going to get more chances than a Mike Williams, who's a guy who I believe was undrafted, or Mike White, who was undrafted. So when you have that, you're coaching that position with a second overall pick, who's supposed to be the guy because, he could throw 60 yards going the wrong direction, but can't make, the three-step drop, hit the quick slant. Like when you have the guy who can't do that, but he's a second overall pick, do you have the courage to go to the GM and say, yo, I know he was second overall pick. I know that he's supposed to be the guy, the franchise, but hey, we got to go with the guy who our team believes in, the guy who they ride around in practice, and Mike White, who, isn't going to be, Patrick Mahomes, but maybe he could win us some games. And that defense has been so good. So I'm going to go Robert Saleh for coach of the year so far. My pick has changed a little bit because I believe the first time we did it, I had Nick Sirianni, and I also had, Brian Daboll right in there. But Robert has come up and taken that top spot for me. So now let's move on to comeback player of the year.
Man, this is another one that there's one person that I think could probably steal this, but they'll have to go crazy in the last fourth of the season. I'm looking at you, Melvin Gordon. But right now I'm going with Geno Smith. I think there's no way the prosciutto man himself should be having a season like he is this season. And it's not fake either. Like it's definitely lasted the test of time. The fact that they're consistently scoring 30 points. And once again, the eye test is just, it's there. Like every time, I don't know what flip was switched. I don't know what changed, but it's undeniable at this point of the season. Geno Smith for sure.
I'm not mad at that pick. I love Geno Smith. I'm just gonna go with Saquon because he is definitely killing it, and he came. He's coming back from a devastating injury. Geno's definitely coming back from being slighted and not being believed in. But Saquon's killing, man. Saquon Barkley this year, almost 1,000 yards. He's gonna cross 1,000 yards next game. 7 rushing touchdowns, 4.4 yards per carry, and I believe could be used more in the receiving game if they just knew how to do it. Only 223 receiving yards, but I think it could be more. So Saquon Barkley is my comeback player, but not mad at the Geno pick at all. So now let's talk about the rookies. Let's get to the defensive rookie of the year.
Man, this is another one. It's staying steady for me. Sauce. I mean, obviously there was a couple plays that stood out in this last game that were a little more questionable than you would expect for him. A couple penalties that ended up costing him a bunch of chunk yards. But I still think he's far and away one of the best corners in the league, and that's not even considering the fact that he's a rookie. So I give it to Sauce Gardner.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. A rookie leading the league in passes defended with 14. Has 48 total tackles from the cornerback position as well. That's big time. So yeah, Sauce Gardner seems like he's going to be a problem for a long time to come for wide receivers and defenses. Going to be a guy who I can see his numbers as far as like passes defended, interceptions going down over the years to come because people are going to be avoiding him. And he's going to be shutting down side of the field, changing the offense's whole strategy because he's out there. He's going to be that dynamic. So Sauce Gardner is my defensive rookie of the year. How about offensive rookie of the year?
And real quick too, I just got to know, like the traction is here. Like this man got to deal with Buffalo Wild Wings. He got his own sauce there. Like
Yeah.
the traction is real, especially here in New York. They love him for sure. So we're now at the offensive rookie of the year, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I think everyone that's holding that Damian Pierce ticket, they're sweating right now. They are sweating because it's coming down to the wire. In these last couple of weeks, he hasn't
It is.
performed. And just off of that, I'm gonna have to give it to Kenneth Walker III. I think this is a
Mm.
race that can keep going back and forth for the last couple of weeks, but just in this past 3 week stretch, Kenneth Walker has really outdid a lot of the production early on, and the fact that he doesn't have the same amount of games played, right? He started getting that opportunity a couple of games into the season. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. But right now, this week, give me Kenneth Walker III.
I'm not mad at that pick. I'm still going Damian Pierce, but I went back and forth on it. Damian Pierce definitely has slowed down, and Houston looks like they're in tank mode for sure. So that's going to hurt him because teams are just going to be like, oh, we just got to stop him. That's it. So it's going to hurt him as far as that. So I can see Kenneth Walker by the time we do our last one for week 17. I can see me changing my opinion on this and going with Kenneth Walker for sure. But I'm going to stay with Damian Pierce for right now, but I see where you're going with this. So now let's get to the defensive player of the year.
Another one, Steady Eddie. Give me Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big name that you could sort of look to unearth him would be Matt Judon at this point of the season.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a Ravens fan, so that's something I don't mind too much. But then I always think back to that interview he did talking about how mac and cheese is a meal only for cretins and criminals, and that's the only thing speaking there is him being in New England, right? This is some white shit. This is
Yes.
not a nuanced opinion. This is not how you really felt. You're just pandering to the New Hampshire audience. So,
Yeah.
Matt Judon, I love you, bud, but you have betrayed me. I don't know who you are anymore. So I got to give it to Michael Parsons. But on a more serious note, obviously they're right there when it comes to the sack leaders.
Yeah.
But he has, I think, 3 times the takeaways with fumbles. Michael Parsons just having an insane career, let alone year.
Yeah.
So Michael Parsons for sure.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Michael Parsons. Just to add a little bit to it, already got 12 sacks in 11 games played, 3 forced fumbles, 50 total tackles, and just absolute monster, man. Like, you know how sometimes like you just can tell somebody's different amongst different people. Like all NFL players are different. Like all those guys are phenomenal athletes compared to you and me. They're all phenomenal, right? And then you have somebody who's like the alien among all the other aliens. Like he comes into the room and all the other aliens bow down. That's Michael Parsons. Like that was like Randy Moss when he first came into the league, and Barry Sanders, those type of guys where you're like, this is just different. And that's what you see in Michael Parsons. It's just totally different. And hopefully, we get to continue to see this for years to come because he is destroying right now. So I got to go with Michael Parsons as well on that one. So what about offensive player of the year?
This is one where we finally got some parity here, and I think that this is a real argument, right? Because I think the favorite here is Tyreek Hill. I think no
Yeah.
matter how you slice it, his numbers speak for themselves. But here I'm going to make a case for Stephon Diggs. He's
Oh.
currently ranked third in receiving, but out of all those top 3 receivers, he has twice, yes, twice the amount of touchdowns for all of them. So I think a lot of love and hype went to Gabe Davis, obviously after the playoff performance he had.
Yeah.
But when it comes to secondary, like 1-2 punch receivers, they're obviously one of the best in the league. But I think Stephon Diggs has really made up for a lot of that production where you think Gabe Davis is that guy where he's getting a consistent 1,000 yards a year. And it hasn't really played out that way, especially these last couple of weeks. And Stephon Diggs has just been always reliable, always out there looking to make something happen. And when you consider you grew up getting covered all the time by your brother, right? Who's over
Yeah.
there in Dallas doing the damn thing. You can only imagine that iron sharpens iron for sure. And I got to give it to Stephon Diggs. It's a wild card pick. I know he's third in yards right now, but touchdowns speak for something.
Okay, no, I'm not mad at that at all. I like that pick. I was like, okay, caught me off guard, but you definitely make a great case. And I know that Tyreek Hill is the favorite, but I'm going with Justin Jefferson here. Justin Jefferson is second in yards. He's right behind him. Like he's catching up to Tyreek Hill. He now has 1,232 yards, 81 receptions, only 6 catches behind Tyreek Hill, and 5 touchdowns. Like you mentioned, both Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill are a little low on the touchdowns. That's why Stephon Diggs has double the amount. But when it comes to yards per touch, 15 yards per touch for Justin Jefferson, which leads the NFL. So everything he does is explosive. And he might have the catch of the century. I think we got to put that in there. Like the catch he had in that Buffalo game may be the catch of the century. And I'm not just talking about from 2000 to 2022. I'm talking about from 2022 to 1922. Like it might just be the catch of the century. Like it was absolutely ridiculous what he was able to do in that game. And the thing is, he's had a couple of down games this year. And even with those games, he's still been able to put up these total numbers, which show you how explosive he can be when he's on. So Justin Jefferson is my pick. Not mad if you got Tyreek Hill out there, listeners. But Stephon Diggs, Chris makes a good argument for Stephon Diggs there. So I'm not mad at that at all.
Real quick though, that also shows the evolution of the receiver position too, because you remember just over 8 years ago, a fucking helmet catch was one of the craziest fucking things we've seen, and now it's just standard practice. The tight ends are out here catching balls with one hand. The receivers definitely have been really putting on in a different way, and the fact that there's multiple people in this conversation is dope.
For sure. Yeah, like I feel like wide receivers, maybe when somebody studies like evolution, they could go to wide receivers first and like you see how these guys evolved over the years and how like they became bigger, stronger, faster, able to do so many more things than their predecessors, man. So yeah, that's a great point right there. So now let's get to the main award, MVP. Who is your MVP so far?
You already know I'm going Lamar Jackson. Now let me stop. I can't go Homer. I can't go home. I want to, but it's undeserved, especially after last week.
Yeah.
This is also the steady pick, right? This is somebody that early on we weren't even. I mean, he was in the conversation, but he wasn't the first guy we were thinking of. But give me Patrick Mahomes. I think in a year where there was an expected downturn in his production, he's only kept it up to the same level while also changing the game, right? Being more dynamic, um, making it so that Travis Kelce doesn't miss a beat and has so many touchdowns on top of almost being 1,000-yard receiver himself, and just spreading the ball around, like always doing something every week that really catches your eye, and like we've talked about before, just really passes the eye test in my opinion as the best quarterback of this era, and that includes people like Tom Brady. I full-heartedly believe that, and I'm interested to see how he continues to evolve. So give me Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I got Patrick Mahomes as well. Just to give a shout out, you mentioned him earlier, Tua Tagovailoa, saying that Tua is him. Tua definitely should be in the conversation. He should be like top 3 on that ballot. If it wasn't for the games missed with the concussion or concussions, he'd be right there in the conversation for sure with the best stats. And he's been absolutely balling this year. He gave you a right to give him a shout out. And I love how they haven't played with their food, right? This week they took care of Houston. It was over by the beginning of the second quarter. They're not playing around. And that's, maturity as a team and maturity from your quarterback. But Patrick Mahomes, man, they're 9-2 as a team. He's completing 66% of his passes, leads the league in yards with 3,585, leads the league in touchdowns, strong with 29, only 8 interceptions, and 8.1 yards per attempt. So normally when you see a very accurate quarterback, sometimes you'll see a low number on yards per attempt because they're, dinking and dunking. But you're definitely not seeing that with Patrick Mahomes. He's accurate while also attacking downfield and doing it in a different way. No Tyreek Hill, so the wide receivers aren't as open. You've seen games where teams are like more daring to play man-to-man instead of playing zone. Like last year, it was all about too high, right? That's all we heard was, oh man, teams are playing too high against the Chiefs. And they can't adjust. This year, teams are like, oh, we're going to play man. We feel like our cornerbacks are better than your receivers, and we'll double Travis Kelce, and we'll go from there. And he's still able to make plays and use his feet to extend plays and get people open. And that's why he's the MVP, because he just makes magic happen on that field. So I agree with you on Patrick Mahomes for sure. So we just did our week 12 or our 3/4-ish review of the season, our week 12 winners and losers. So now let's get to a little basketball. So we're combining quarter reviews. We did our 3/4-ish review for the NFL. Let's do our first quarter review for the NBA, as a lot of teams have reached that 20 game mark. So now we're getting to where we're starting to get some real stats, a real sample size for some of these guys in the NBA. And I asked you for your top 5 MVP candidates. Let's start with number 5.
Number 5, someone that we were talking about earlier today on the show. Call me a homer, but I think the numbers really do speak for themselves. If this was any other year, I think he would be the leading candidate, right? If this is
Yeah.
any other year, but
Yeah.
for some reason, this is the year of absolutely bonkers performances. I wonder if it's going to continue throughout the rest of the season,
Yeah.
but it really is something special. Shout out my guy Logic. This is something we've been talking about literally all week. Just the level of play across the NBA is crazy right now. But
Yeah.
right now, my number 5 is Gilgeous Alexander. I think he is someone that's always hovering around the triple double, always literally, it feels like every night scoring 30 points and getting it in multiple different ways. I love the little runner he's developed in the paint. I love the 3-point shot, especially from the corner, and the pull up jumper, man. Like, I feel like the mid range is underutilized in today's game. Usually now when people shoot mid range jumpers, you see young folks cringe. But I still got some old in me. I feel like whenever I could appreciate a nice mid range game. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander deserves to be in that conversation.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that. I know I keep saying that today, but I'm not mad at that pick, right? Especially at number 5. I had him as one of my honorable mentions. You mentioned how he's so far this year 31.1 points per game, 6.2 assists, shooting 51% from the field, which is crazy from the guard position. Like, that is absolutely nuts. And 35% from 3. I mentioned earlier how even if his shots not going in, he's still going to be aggressive and find ways to score. Today against the Pelicans, went 16 of 18 from the free throw line. So he's going to find ways to get into the paint and to attack, even against great defenders like Herb Jones. So I'm not mad at that pick at number 5. My number 5 may be a surprise to some people, but I love what he's been able to do for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm going with Donovan Mitchell at number 5. Giving you 30.1 points per game this year, 5.2 assists, 4.2 rebounds, and playing defense. That was one of the things that he was criticized for in Utah, was a lack of effort on the defensive end. When you watch Cleveland play, you're seeing everybody on defense giving maximum effort, rotation, staying in front of their guys, being in the right spot to help. And Donovan Mitchell's been a big part of that. And I love seeing that from him, being a leader on that team, coming in as he's young, but veterans now are young, right? And he's somebody who came in as a vet guy to this team and has really shown them, winning effort and also putting up these crazy numbers. So Donovan Mitchell at number 5 for me. And Cleveland, sneaky, might be a real contender against the conference.
I love it. I love it 100%. We'll
Yeah.
call us homers here, but if he's not in your top 7, like, you're just not paying attention. I agree. I think he's really outperformed. I mean, when you get a trade like that, you have to come in and ball. I mean, that's why everyone is criticizing Rudy Gobert right now, his former teammate. Same exact situation. They got traded for a lot of picks, a big draft haul, and he's the only one really delivering at this point of the season. So I agree, man.
Thank you. Thank you. So now let's get to number 4.
This is where shit gets hard, right? Because the fact that literally the fact that there's no, like, KD's not in sight in my top 5, and I don't think he should be in yours either. And he is balling like uncharacteristic for KD. Like, he's doing well in a great career of seasons.
Yeah.
So to see the fact that he's not in this conversation is crazy. My number 4, I'm gonna give it to Jokic, and I think at this point of the season, his numbers are historic, like literally historic. I think throughout the rest of the year, if there's anyone that I think is going to tailor off a little bit, it might be him. Obviously, he has 2 of them already on his mantle. So I think this year he really wants to, I would think that he wants to see the production from the rest of his team as well. He's going to ball regardless. And I think on any other year, like this, once again, this is a no-brainer season when you look at the numbers. But I could see him being higher. I could see him being lower. I just feel like, in a way, when you have 2 MVPs, it's going to be harder for you to get the third one, right? Like, even if your numbers merit it. So that's why I have a number 4 right now. But long term, man, if you could put up numbers like that in a consistent way, like, A, your team's going to be in a good position, but B, like, you really got to start thinking about whether or not he's an all-time great, not just at that position, but just period. So,
Well, yeah, two MVPs already, and the advanced numbers that he's put up so far in his career have been absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, and this year the scoring's down, but the impact is still there. But like you said, his scoring is down because maybe he wants to see Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. get off, and Aaron Gordon and those guys get into a rhythm. So now when it comes to those playoff situations, they're not so dependent on Jokic to do everything. So I like that pick at number 4. My number 4, it's crazy that he's number 4 because his numbers are number 1 MVP numbers, but his team hasn't been good this year so far. They're starting to find that groove a little bit now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them go on a run here. But I'm going to go with Steph Curry at number 4. Steph Curry is having, you mentioned earlier, KD's having a great year, even for KD. Steph Curry is having a great shooting year, even for Steph Curry, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Giving you 31.4 points per game, 7.1 assists, 6.8 rebounds. I believe he's still leading the team in rebounds, which is not good for the Golden State Warriors. But he's been balling out, shooting 52% from the field and 44% from three. Like I said, a great year from three, even for Steph Curry, which is saying a lot when you talk about the greatest shooter of all time. And if they continue to start to find their groove, Klay Thompson's been playing better lately. If they start to find their groove and they go on a 5-10 game winning streak, which we all know the Warriors are capable of, Steph Curry will definitely move up my list. And if we do like our half, mark review, and I could see Steph Curry being number 1 for sure there. So Steph Curry is my number 4.
I'm so glad you have him on the list. I didn't put him on mine. But when you actually consider the name, right, the award,
Yeah.
most valuable player, I think he is that 100% on his team this year. I was honestly surprised that they slid the way that they did. Obviously now things are starting to pick up again. But I really think there was some big rifts that we still weren't privy to with that whole situation with Draymond Green and Jordan Poole. So interested to see
bro,
how that
like,
plays out for the rest
real
of the
quick,
season.
there's no way there couldn't be, bro. Like, people tried to downplay that. Like, bro, I played
Like, that
sports.
happens all the time. Like, nah,
Yeah.
bro, I'm not out here getting decked in pickup, bro. Like, what are you talking about?
Bro, like, I played sports, bro. Like, that wasn't, you have your fights. Like, I even got into a fight, in high school, right? Me and a guy, we're doing box out drills, which is just made for you getting fights. We're doing box out drills. And, I didn't, guy elbowed me. I didn't like it. We got into a fight. But that's like in the action. Like, you took offense to something they did in the moment. Draymond walked 15 feet over to Jordan Poole. No one else stopped him. That's the thing that I think people were kind of over glancing or just glancing over, in the video. If Jordan Poole would have said something that was universally like deemed disrespectful, I think someone else would have turned around and be like, yo, like you can't, you said that, like,
Don't come over here. Don't, yeah.
like he'd have said something that people would have deemed as fighting words, someone else would have stepped in. So I don't think he said anything that people are like, oh my God, that was extremely disrespectful. I feel like Draymond just was on one and like went over there and just decked my guy. And like, as a boxing fan, that was a good right hand. Like, he decked him.
It was clean. Followed through as well. Yeah.
Like, my man followed through. He turned the foot. Like, he did. Like, it was a good right hand. So for me, I'm like, yo, there's no way there wasn't something that lingered from that for sure. So I'm with you on that. Like, people try to downplay that, especially like former athletes, like, yo, that happens. No, you have little fisticuffs. You'll have fights, but somebody decking somebody like that doesn't happen all the time. Like, we hear about it, like when old dude from the Bulls got his jaw broken by Bobby Portis. Like, those happen from very seldomly do those happen. We hear about it when it happens. So I'm glad you brought that up again, because people are trying to downplay. I'm like, don't play us like we stupid, bro. Like, just because we weren't professional athletes, don't try to play us like we dumb, bro. That doesn't normally happen. But my fault for the rant. Who's at your number 3?
I like it. And we got some combat sports talk. I always force my way in. So we're going to get some more of that later on too. But for number 3, this was also very hard for me. But just looking at the numbers, I thought the case, man, Giannis is on one again, right? Like, this man, what he does, I mean, the rebounding numbers aren't screaming at you the way that they have in previous years, but the points are up, and just the impact on the team, right? When you consider most valuable, his team, I believe they have the 3rd best record in the league right now. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they're balling. So he's in that list, and the fact that he every single season, I feel like if there's anyone that embodies that, and I took that personal mentality, like it's him. Like he comes back every year, like really corrected a lot of the things that people were complaining about last year. And I feel like his control now in the paint, and still drawing the same amount of fouls, and being consistent too at the line. Like I just feel like he's someone that whenever I hear about his growth and him doing well, like I'm happy for him, right? Like there's few guys where you don't really want to see him winning. Like Giannis, if you hating on Giannis, I think it says a lot about you. So I always keep my eye out for those folks. So shout out to Giannis.
Yeah, Giannis is somebody who's very hard to even criticize, even when he has his bad shooting nights. Like even when he has those, it's hard to criticize him because he just comes off as such a good guy. Even when he had the whole Montrezl Harrell thing and him pushing the ladder down, then we find out it was Montrezl Harrell, the one that was being messy in the situation. Like so it's really hard to hit on Giannis. I have Giannis at number 3 as well. You mentioned the rebound numbers don't scream at you, but it's still 11.4 rebounds per game. Like he's still out here getting the boards. I think the reason they're a little bit down is that Brook Lopez is also balling this year. Like very under the radar, Brook Lopez is balling this year. And still without Chris Middleton, without Pat Connaughton for most of the year, no Joe Ingles yet. So they haven't been full yet. They haven't been a full healthy squad yet. And they still start off the year, 8-0? They start off the year and have still been able to carry and keep that mentality and keep that running through the rest of this year. And hopefully once they get fully healthy, we'll see like a true championship contender, and we'll hopefully see Giannis continue this. But 30.9 points per game, so basically 31 points a game, 11.4 rebounds, 5.4 assists, shooting 53% from the field, and defensively still being dynamic. And offensively has added to his bag. He's been criticized for a lack of bag in the past. We see him come down the court a few times this year. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Hit you with the dribble moves and go around you, or hit you with a little boom, 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 then post you up and fade away. Like he's added to his bag. He's been working on it. Like you said, he's the guy who, okay, I don't have a bag. Let's see me next year. You're going to see what I did in the offseason. And you're seeing that now with the dribble moves and also improving. And if he has a bad night at the free throw line, you see him right after the game working on his free throws. He's somebody who's going to continue to get better throughout his career because he's going to continue to work on his game. I love Giannis so much, man. So who do you have at number 2?
Once again, just a Shark Tank. This top 10. It could be a top 10, really.
It could. It's an awesome year for players.
Best record in the league. I got to go with Jason Tatum. He also has been balling, someone that I have on my fantasy team. So I've been watching what he's doing closely. Another person who's still consistently at that 30 point per game mark, right? It's so rare that we have 2 people at that 30 point per game. Right now, I think it's 6. So just really balling and doing better in that facilitator role too. Actually taking that personal. I feel like there was a lot of big turnovers in the playoffs, and that was a big focus of the conversation too. So seeing him still have, I think, almost at 5 assists a game this year, on top of obviously them just doing so well as a team and defensively as well. He is also someone who I think sneaky doesn't get the looks for defensive player of the year because he's out there guarding the best player every single night on the opposing player's team for some period of time. I know him and Marcus Smart definitely do switch off, but I'm a big fan of Jason Tatum, and he doesn't get the respect he deserves. He's a top 5 player in this league for the last 3 years now, and I've been saying that, but everyone wants to say that he doesn't belong in that top 5. So shout out Jason Tatum.
Man, like I've been saying, Jason Tatum's a top 5 player, and I really started like stepping it down during the playoffs last year. And because he had a subpar finals, people forgot what he did to get Boston to the finals, like beating Kevin Durant and outplaying Kevin Durant in the first round, outplaying Giannis in the second round, outlasting Jimmy Butler and the Heat, who just don't go away, in the third round to get to the NBA Finals, where I think if he still had something left in the tank, and I picked Boston in that series, and I thought they were going to win. I know Derek probably still thinks they got cheated, but it's Jason Tatum, like you said, top 5 player for sure. Now at number 2, I have Ja Morant. I think that the Grizzlies are balling out this year. They just mollywop my Pelicans Friday night. They are balling, and you can see his impact just all over the floor, giving you 28 points a game, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, shooting 47% from the floor, 37% from 3. So you have somebody that explosive, shooting over 35% from three and legit like pulling up from, he's had a couple this year where he's pulling up from, damn near half court and making it as easy for him. When he's able to do that, there's nothing you can do to stop him, because now you have to respect it. You have to step up, and he's zooming right past you. You have no shot of staying in front of this guy if you don't give him space. So I love what I'm seeing, and love that he's getting to the free throw line 9 times a game. 9.2 free throws a game. I would love to see him increase that free throw percentage, though. It's at 75 right now. So if he gets to 85, 90% with 9 free throw attempts a game, he can join that 30-point club that has the 6 players right now for sure. So I have Ja Morant number 2. Who do you have at number 1?
Man, I don't even have Ja Morant in my top 5, and I just disappointed myself. Like, that's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah, he just had a triple-double the other night, too. So, yes, Ja Morant always doing his thing. Ivica Zubac, the center for the Clippers. Now, let me stop. But he did have a 31. Listen, he had a 31 and 29 game.
Yeah.
He fouled out because Ty Lue wanted him to get that 30-30. But shout out to him. I've been talking about him every time people give me a chance to.
He's been doing his thing this
He's
year.
been balling, yeah, especially on the defensive end. But in all seriousness, if Luka isn't your number 1, you're smoking drugs. Let's just be very clear about this. Shout out my guy Logic, big Dallas Mavericks fan, and won't let me hear the end. Whenever Luka Doncic does anything, I have videos in my inbox making sure that I know what's going on. But really, this year has been something special. I think his game has always been very weird for me because of how smooth it is, right? Smooth. Yeah. That's an endearing term for unathletic. The things he does, it kind of, you feel like I could do that, and then you see it go in and it's like, no, I can't do that. I'm really a big fan of his game, and just the way that he's so efficient and also growing as a playmaker. Like, I love the way he commands the offense, and always I love seeing him telling people like when to cut and things like that. Like, he's just a very good leader and someone that isn't like, he's not really a dick about it, right? Like, he's just doing it trying to help. Like, I know sometimes you'll see certain guys, like, it'll kind of rub you the wrong way. With him though, like, if Luka's pissed off, like, you must have not listened a couple times beforehand for him to get to that point. I feel like he's a really good leader as well, and just historic numbers when it comes to efficiency offensively, and obviously the highest point per game out of anybody right now in the league, on top of almost averaging a damn near triple-double when you look at the stats. So Luka Doncic is a fucking unicorn, man. And I know that Mark Cuban is just salivating at the potential for the rest of the season in jersey sales. So Luka Doncic is my MVP at this point.
Man, you talked about how you like, oh man, I didn't have Luka in my top 5, bro. I know.
Wow.
I'm one of those guys smoking trucks right now, but the reason I didn't have Luka is that the league is so deep right now. And I was looking at, when I was going over my MVP list, I was looking at the records as well. I know I included Steph, but Steph was, his historic numbers for him. And with Luka, with Dallas kind of struggling as of late, I was like, should I put him? I know he's missed a couple games as well. I was like, dang, should I put him in there with him struggling? Having my honorable mention right next to SGA. But number 1, you mentioned earlier, Jason Tatum. I got him as my MVP right now. Absolutely killing, man, on both sides. I love two-way players. That's one of, you call them the real deal isms or the Damian Adams isms. Two-way players is a Damian Adams ism. Like, forever, they've been my favorite players. Drew Holiday, even like when he was with the Pelicans and even with the Bucks, one of my favorite players. Kawhi Leonard when healthy. Jimmy Butler. Those type of players who could play both sides of the ball. I just love those players. And Jason Tatum's on that list. And you mentioned earlier, 30.5 points per game, 8 rebounds, damn near 5 assists, 47% from the field, 35% from 3. Another guy getting to the free throw line 9 times a game, and he's shooting 87% from the free throw line. So he's getting to the free throw line and making you pay for it while also locking you down on the defensive end. And you see the way the ball is moving in Boston. That's a big part on him, because he's the type of player who could slow it down and bar down the offense. You couldn't really tell him anything because he's the best player. But he's buying in to moving the ball around and making sure that his team looks efficient. And because the team is playing so well, I'm like, he has to be the MVP right now, because not only is he giving you the individual things, that team looks unstoppable. Like, I know it was Charlotte tonight, but good Lord, they put a whooping on Charlotte. And you like just looking at what they're doing this year. Boston right now looks like the best team in the league. I understand Milwaukee isn't healthy yet. I love Milwaukee, and if Chris Middleton comes back to being Chris Middleton, I definitely have them right there. And in the Western Conference right now, it's kind of just up in the air. So with Boston being a team that looks so good so far, I gotta go Jason Tatum #1. But I do gotta revamp my list and think about Luka. But I just don't know who to take out. Donovan Mitchell, I probably gotta take him out. But I wanted to put Donovan Mitchell in there as kind of my surprise pick, though.
For sure. I like that. I like that all. And I'm gonna throw you a little curveball here. Not expected at all, but what's your most underrated storyline from this NBA season so far?
Ooh, most underrated storyline so far. It's probably the struggle of the Miami Heat. I mentioned Jimmy Butler earlier and how Miami is a team that you just expect to be good. And Kyle Lowry looks not just washed, but he looks washed, dried, and folded at this point. And you're like, if that's your point guard, can you really succeed? They got, my man Duncan Robinson just making money on the bench, just stealing checks over there. And Tyler Hero's been good, but do you have to have him come off the bench just so that bench can be productive? Because that bench, when he's starting, that bench is not productive at all. So Miami not just playing well at all is really an underrated storyline. I feel like the Utah Jazz, they've been covered, so I wouldn't say it's underrated, but it's something that definitely is surprising that they're still playing pretty well. I think they're starting to come back down to earth a little bit, but the fact that they're still playing pretty well is something that's very surprising. But to get back to your original question, most underrated storyline, I'll say Miami struggling. What about you?
Yeah, for me, it's Sacramento and the things that they've
Oh
been
yeah,
able to
they've
do.
been
Obviously,
balling.
I'm a big fan of Sabonis being a OKC guy, and just once again, just imprints all over the league of the what we're able to do on the scouting side. But anyway, I love their young guard core. Like I feel like they could every night really shuffle around the minutes and still have a productive turnaround by the end. I'm a really big fan of Damian Mitchell specifically. I think he's a dog defensively and really being able to shut guys down while also not having to be that main facilitator. Like that wasn't his role. That's not who he was gonna be coming out of college. And they're using him very well as like a developing 3-and-D guy as well as somebody who is just going to get the minutes because they're out there really guarding their best opponent. So I'm a big fan, man. I think Sacramento can do big things. I don't know if they're going to be outside of the play-in team, but they're almost at that. I believe they're the 7th seed right now. So really interested to see whether or not they can keep it up to this level for the entirety of the season. But big fan of what they've been able to do, and they get no love. They have no national TV games, so
Yeah.
gotta give them some shine.
No, that's a very good call. Like the beam, as they do in Sacramento.
So
And they've been playing pretty
good.
well. But speaking of Sabonis, his former team, the Pacers, that's another one that's going under the radar. 11-8 right now, 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. And the way they play, like they played against the Pelicans maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and they gave us the business. That offense was moving around. Miles Turner is spread out to the 3-point line. Much as I love Jonas Valanciunas, he's not built for that type of style when you have all 5 guys spread out. And now you're asking Jonas Valanciunas to guard the perimeter. They took full advantage of that. And Miles Turner's a guy who's been in trade rumors for years now, but now they might keep him and say, maybe we could, build around Tyrese Halliburton and, Ben Mathurin and Miles Turner is kind of our core there. And you'll see, man, they're playing pretty well. Rick Carlisle has those guys playing well. So that's another one that's kind of going under the radar as the Pacers playing pretty well this year.
I like that too, and shout out to Chris Duarte too. He's injured
Yeah.
right now, but I'm a big fan of his game too. He reminds me a lot of CJ McCollum, I think.
Yeah.
So that's a nice little shout there. But yeah, I love me some underappreciated teams that are really showing that they're going to be around for the whole season. So I love it.
For sure. Now, you said that you had something special for me as far as in combat sports. So let's get to that before we get out of here tonight.
Yes, sir. So obviously this was a fight that we talked about recently that just went down between Regis Prograis and Jose Zepeda. So I just wanted to get your thoughts coming off of that event. And then I want to go on a little tangent because there was something that I noticed in this fight that I've been noticing a lot lately in combat sports. So I can't wait to get into that. But what was your thoughts on Regis Prograis' big win over the weekend?
So I didn't get to see the fight. That's gonna be, and that's a part of my rant. I'm all week. Where's this fight gonna be at? I'm searching, I'm Googling, like, where's this fight gonna be at? And I finally get it. I find out where it's gonna be, and it's gonna be on Fight, FITE, and they're charging $60. Like, yo, what's going on here? Like, and I'm like, I want to support my man Regis. I told you, like, he's the one guy in boxing who I truly root for. Like, I'm normally non-biased and objective, but I root for Regis Prograde because he's from New Orleans, like myself, and took the time to be on my show. So I'm like, he's the guy who I root for and I want to support. But I need Regis Prograde to get back to being with Top Rank or ESPN or The Zone, somebody where I can find where he is. Because I literally every time I would look it up, it would say check your local listings. I'm like, bro, I'm trying to. Like,
I'm trying.
Like I can't. Like it took forever for me to find out where it was. And then like we were doing like a little family thing, and it was on Fight, and it was $60. I'm like, am I gonna spend $60 to watch on my phone? And I was very tempted to. I was very tempted to spend the money and watch it, but I was like, nah, I got a feeling how this fight's gonna go, and it went exactly how I thought it was gonna go. So I was like, I'm not gonna spend the money. But that's my thought is they made it way too hard to find where this fight was gonna be. And then once I found it, y'all was charging $60. Come on, man.
Yeah, not gonna be able to do it. Like I hit my stream up immediately, expeditiously. Funny enough, I wasn't even home at the moment, like when it was starting the undercard.
Yeah.
My dad's a big boxing guy, so he was like trying to get me to get him a link. He's like, "What is it on? What is it on?" He kept asking me, so I'm like, "All right, let me check." And I know Fight TV because MMA degeneracy. There's always MMA events on Fight TV.
Yeah.
So literally, my account, funny enough, like they give you, and this is how you know that this is more of an MMA site because they give you a rank based on how often you're on it. I'm like a brown belt right now. So like I'm a Fight TV veteran, and I still didn't know this shit was on Fight TV until I had to search it out. So that's hilarious that you mentioned that. As far as the fight goes, I think this is one you might benefit from watching back, just because I didn't expect Regis Prograde to look as good as he did. I think Zepeda came out like a bat out of hell in the first round, really gave him trouble, pushed him back. But then after that, he regrouped in a great way and sort of just kept on the pressure while also being defensively responsible. I love his inside clinch game, man. Like I know the stories are there. Obviously, he trained at MMA as well, besides just boxing. So there's an MMA sort of connection there. So I'm always gonna have a little bit of extra love, but especially on his inside work, you see it. You see the head positioning, the head control, using your head as a third appendage out there. For anyone who's never done clinch wrestling or mat wrestling, so to speak, it is the most frustrating thing ever because it's like it. Just think about it intuitively. It's easy to grab someone's hand off of you. To push someone's head off of you is something entirely different. And he's a dog with it. Like he does a really good job slipping inside and making angles in places where people usually don't even move. They just try to tie up and hold on. He finds an angle and then he's cracking Zepeda and hurting him from those inside spots. So I really loved what I saw from him, and then putting him away in the 11th late after hurting him multiple times. Like there was a couple of times where I felt like he could have gotten him out of there, but he was just being conscious and not letting that storm come back. Because I feel like Zepeda, while he was, let's call it how it is, a little defensively irresponsible, especially early on, keeping his hands down. That style was also giving Regis trouble. So there was a couple times where he ended up popping his head back with some nasty jabs, because obviously you get to point A to point B faster when you're ducking into it versus a straight on jab. So I really like what I saw from Zepeda too, just grit wise, like staying in it. But the story of this fight really was Prograde's not only relentless offense, but his creativity on offense too. Like he has a hooking punch. I can't even call it a hook or a straight. Like it's in between. Like it comes down and then it comes straight out like a straight punch. It is beautiful, man. I love it. And I'm a big fan of what I saw. I can't wait to see him against some more top flight competition at 140.
Oh man, I can't wait, man. I know that we've been waiting on the Jack Catterall versus Josh Taylor rematch, but I would love to see Regis Prograde get another shot at Josh Taylor. Even though I'm a Regis Prograde fan, I have to admit that he did lose that fight. Josh Taylor was able to outbox him, and the movement of Josh Taylor gave him some problems in that one. That's what surprised me so much about when Josh Taylor fought against Catterall. I was like, why is Josh Taylor fighting like this against Catterall? Like he was going straight in, wasn't using angles. And for some reason, just even though Catterall would duck every time, he kept trying to hit the 1-2. Kept trying to hit the 1-2, or for him it's the reverse. And he kept trying to hit the 1-2, and it wasn't working. You're like, oh, I understand what Josh Taylor was on that fight. But hopefully he'll come back in a rematch and show that he's a better fighter than Catterall. And then we'll see, maybe we'll get, Josh Taylor versus
Regis Prograis if Josh Taylor doesn't move to 147. But there's other 140 is low again, so it's starting to be loaded. So I think that we might see Regis Prograis maybe against Teofimo Lopez in the future, or Devin Haney once he moves up. I can see those type of fights happening. So Regis Prograis, I think the future is bright, and he made the right decision to stay at 140. I just wish that he was on a bigger platform and signed with better management, or not. I shouldn't say better. I don't know if they're bad or good, but management that had more access to easier platforms. And obviously, the fact that I couldn't find out where this fight was till the night of the fight is an issue. I think that's an issue, especially if somebody like myself who's constantly trying to figure out where the fights are so I could watch it. And for me not to be able to find it until it was too late. And I didn't even think to, do the whole Stream East thing, because I was figuring if I couldn't find it, Stream East was going to have it. Because sometimes with boxing, they won't have all the boxing stuff. That's the only thing with boxing when it comes to trying to stream it. That's why I just rather just find out what platform it's on and do it through there. Because sometimes with boxing, the streamers aren't going to have it. But I will go back and watch it just because you said that I should go back and watch it just to see exactly what happened in that fight. So I love that. Did you have any more combat stuff?
Takeaways? Yes. So the big takeaway from this fight too, and the reason why I brought it up, in the 11th round, right before the knockout, so excuse me, in the 10th round, right before the 11th round knockout, there was a couple punches that landed on Prograis that it looked like he stunned him for a little bit, where a right hook landed and sort of froze Prograis for a second. And obviously he's very characteristic of him bouncing around and staying on the outside. So seeing him react like that, everyone thought he was hurt. But from that minute on, like, he was able to recover after that initial exchange and then go on, in my opinion, to push back Zepeda for the rest of the round and really damaged him to lead up to that 11th round TKO. But all the announcers were talking about was how this was Zepeda's best round, and how at this point, like, Zepeda needs to continue what he was doing because this is the most success he's had. And I'm like, yeah, when you frame it that way, you're not lying, right? But you're not telling the whole truth. Just because it was his best round doesn't mean that it's of significance. Like, he still lost the fucking round. Like, and I think there's a big bias that I've been noticing a lot lately. And this also ties into the Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, where he ended up getting TKO'd, where there's this real, I call it dominance bias, where if someone is doing well throughout their career, a great example of this is Floyd Mayweather. If anyone has any remote moment of success against them, it's looked at as if they won, right? It's looked at as if, well, he was able to land this or that, and so that means that they're winning this fight now. And it's like, that is so delusional to me. Like, just because there was a moment of you doing something good, it shouldn't outshine the reality of that round. Like, the reality of that round was, you hurt him early, but you weren't able to capitalize. And by the end of the round, he's hurting you. So it's not equivalent. Like, it doesn't matter that this was your biggest round so far, because it still isn't a round you should have won. I personally scored the fight. Obviously it went to the 11th. I only gave the first round to Zepeda. I think after that it was pretty one-sided. So the fact that was the talking point for the commentators and really highlighting this big moment for Zepeda, it's like, man, I get that he has been getting his ass kicked for the last 9 rounds. But let's really talk about the truth here. Like, yes, he had a big moment, but that doesn't mean he's still not being dominated out there. So, and I think that ties into the Izzy fight too, because everyone was so upset about that stoppage. I don't know if you got a chance to see that stoppage, but I personally feel like, and I had a whole debate with this with Derek for like 40 minutes, but I feel if you're calling that an early stoppage, like, you just want to see someone die. Like, at the end of the day, that's just what it is. Because like, Stylebender up to that point of that fight was so ahead that it makes you feel like, hey, we should give him some extra time to try to get out of this. But in reality, when it comes to hospitals and sending people to the hospital, it don't matter who was winning. If you get hit with those kind of shots, like, you're in trouble. And the way he responded, in my opinion, wasn't adequate enough for him to continue on fighting, regardless of how dominant he looked earlier on before that exchange. So I think dominance bias is real in combat sports, more so than any other sport. And I think it really needs to be put into check, because he had a good moment, but after that he was getting his ass kicked. And let's not lose sight of that, because they gave Zepeda that round unanimously, and I'm like, did y'all not see? Like, what? So that's my spiel.
No, it's a great point. One that I brought up when Clarissa Shields fought against Savannah Marshall. And the whole time, Timothy Bradley is trying to act like the fight was close. And anytime Savannah Marshall would do something like, oh, there goes that power. You gotta wait. She got that one shot power. And the whole time, Savannah Marshall was landing one shot for every 8 that Clarissa Shields was landing. Like Clarissa Shields outboxed her so clearly. So clearly. Like you may have given Savannah Marshall maybe 1 round, 2 max, if you're being nice about it. Like, honestly, I scored every round for Shields. There was a couple rounds where Shields took like maybe a few seconds where she just lay on the ropes and took some time off. And if you wanted to give, Marshall those rounds, okay, I can see it. But there was no way to say that fight was close. And then at the end of the fight, first thing Bradley says is, oh man, if Clarissa Shields loses, it's gonna be because she took those breaks and she was on the ropes those times. I'm like, no, if she loses, she got robbed. Like this fight wasn't close at all. And Savannah Marshall, I don't know if you ever saw the movie. I don't know if I made this analogy with you on here, but there was a movie in the 90s called The Great White Hype. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
So that's what this fight reminded me of. Like in the movie, for the people listening, if you're not familiar, Damian Wayans plays this boxer who's a superstar, heavyweight champion of the world. And he has Samuel Jackson as promoter, who isn't Don King, but he's Don King. So you have him, and Samuel Jackson trying to find a way to make more money. So he finds this guy who beat Damian Wayans in the amateurs, who's now like a journeyman boxer, right? Now, Savannah Marshall isn't a journeyman. I'm not going to disrespect her in that way, but her resume, even though she was undefeated, was so light. You look at the names on that resume and the records of the people she fought against, she was nowhere near the class of Clarissa Shields, who came in right away fighting contenders and champions. Nowhere near. And so that's why it reminded me of that, because people try to they built up the fight in the movie as if the white guy really had a chance, and he didn't. Damian Wayans came in out of shape and still knocked him out in the second round of the fight, right? And Clarissa Shields dominated this fight. If Clarissa Shields had power, she would have knocked her out in the first, second round. Clarissa Shields, the one thing she doesn't have is punching power. And she just dominated her, especially with 2-minute rounds. She was able just to go full out for most of it and just hit her with 8 punch combinations. It was nuts. And for me to hear Timothy Bradley like, oh man, this is so close. Oh, if she loses. So yeah, it brought me, when you said that, it brought me back to that moment of being so mad and like, what are you talking about right now? Like, what's happening? And we depend, not me and you, not like diehard fans, but most fans depend on the commentators, especially for like boxing or UFC, to let them know what they don't know, right? So they may see something, especially with me, UFC. I'm a casual UFC fan. So when I'm watching, I'm depending on the guys to tell me, the commentators to tell me what's going on. To tell me like, oh, okay, if I see something, I think this is a good move, but actually the other guy had control the whole time. Because sometimes, a guy might be on the bottom, and to the naked eye like myself, it may seem like he's not in control, but the whole time he's setting up a whole submission, and I'm not even knowing it, right? Something like that can happen. That's what you depend on the announcers to tell you. But if they're going in there with their dominance bias, now you're only not misleading, the casual fan like myself, but now you're, making people like ourselves angry because we see it. We know like you're tripping right now. But because you're the professional, you're the one getting paid, the hundreds of thousands of dollars or the millions of dollars to do this, people are going to take your word over ours. So yeah, you started a whole rant for me.
I like it. I teed it up. You throw it down. I love it. And real quick, I just wanted to also mention, this is a random storyline, but I feel like I need to explain this to you because I think you're gonna get why this burns me so much. Yeah. So real quick, this is entirely UFC related, so follow along with me here because I know you probably aren't aware of the names and everything, but I'm gonna try to break it down as best as possible. So 205-pound division. Currently, the champion was at this point, my guy, Yuri Prochazka, coming off of a big win against Glover Teixeira in a 5-round war. Like, that fight was amazing. That's one of those fights where if you got someone that's on the fence about MMA, you show them that fight because you get to see the kind of craziness as far as back and forth parity that you see in MMA. I'm a big fan of him. I followed him since Risen, so it gutted to hear of his injury, but he just got injured. He was supposed supposed to fight in 2 weeks. He just got injured, separated his shoulder in a way that's going to keep him out for over a year. So he actually did the most honorable thing, something you'll never hear people do, but the samurai way of things, actually relinquished the belt, said, y'all have it. Don't make an interim. Like, it'll go back to the division. I'll find my way back once I'm healthy again. I don't want to hold up the division. Admirable shit, something that you never hear anybody do. So shout out to him for even doing that.
Yeah.
But where I take issue is the way that the UFC handled this. So this is a problem unique to the UFC. This is not something that exists in boxing or in any other real combat sports scenario, but I think it's important to make this distinction. I think in every weight class, regardless of the weight class, there's two different divisions. And I know that doesn't make sense, but hear me out here. There's two different divisions. There's the actual 1 through 15, right? There's the actual, these are the best guys that are in the division. And then there's the, I call it the greatest hits division. They're people who they're fan favorites, they're well known, people know who they are, they're established, and they're in that same top 5 as those other top 15. But when you think about the realistic, like, I guess, matchup, you know, like, these guys are 6 years younger. Like, there's something that it's not the same here, right? Like, eventually those guys are going to get fed, and that's sort of the natural process in combat sports, right?
Yeah.
So this was the scenario. It was going to be Glover versus Yuri 2. Yuri pulled out because he's injured. He's the champ. He relinquished his belt. Now the UFC needs to pivot. Generally, they have 2 title fights. For this one, this was the only title fight. So in their eyes, they have to come up with the solution for this event, because if not, now the event is lost, right? Which I disagree with, but I understand the thought process. So what they did was they reached out to Glover and they said, hey, I got this dude, Magomed Ankalaev, right? Just listen to the name. You don't want to fight that dude. Just hearing the name, you don't want no problems with that dude. He looks just like Mose from The Office, but just an absolute killer, bro. Like, just a monster, and also someone who takes the fight out of the fight, right? So he's not a fan favorite, but he's dominant, right? He's someone that you can't deny his greatness, but along the way, you might get a little frustrated by his approach. He is a part of the actual division when you look at it that way. But they offered that fight to Glover. They say, hey, we'll give you the fight for the undisputed title against this guy, this monster, this young Chechen killer coming up. And Glover, who's 42, it's like, hey, like, I've done a lot of things for you guys. Like, I can't really, like, commit to fighting this dude on short notice. Give me a little bit more time and I'll fight him for the belt. And they're like, nah, we need this fight for this event. Like, you need to fight him or else we're going to go with somebody else. So he's saying, you know, let me fight Jan Blachowicz, which a lot of people know from defending his title when Israel came up and beating Israel. He obviously lost the belt since then and is a top contender, ended up beating another surging contender recently to put himself back as a top contender. So he said, all right, well, Glover's like, why don't you guys just give me Jan? They fought before for the belt. That's how Glover became the champion, right? Glover beat Jan Blachowicz. So he's like, let me fight him again. I fought him before, so I don't need a specific camp for him. And then I'll fight Ankalaev next if I win, right? They're like, nah, we need a fight for this night. We don't care what you asked. And they signed now Jan Blachowicz to fight Magomed Ankalaev, 2 guys who weren't even on the card in the first place. I think they did Glover dirty. Just told him basically, figure it out, dude. We need to fight for this event. I don't care all the things you've done for us throughout your career. What's important to us is this date. I feel like he got railroaded. And that's something in my opinion, you would never see in boxing, right? Like, someone who is well-established, former champion, to not have the leverage to decide who he's going to fight and when, that they just move on and give somebody else a title shot because someone else got injured, your opponent. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, that's nuts to even hear. Like, wow. Yeah, you're right. That wouldn't happen in boxing. It's another, two-edged sword on that one, because one of the things that people love about UFC is that the control that the management has to where they can make the fights they want to make happen, right? And that's one of the things that people hate about boxing, is that there's not enough control. And because of that, you have the whole, Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford situation. You have all the other situations that happen where we don't see the fights, or if we do see them, it's too late, right? You have Mayweather Pacquiao, which should have happened 5 years before it happened, and stuff like that. And you got, all the stuff that happens that makes me call it the real, housewives of the square circle, and all that stuff comes up, right? So you have to find some type of middle ground where you have a commissioner or you have somebody who can control it, but also still have the fighters have leverage to where this doesn't happen. Because yeah, you're right. Glover got totally messed over in that situation. Like especially someone like that, because even as a casual, that name, I know that name. And it's like, oh, this guy has done a lot for the UFC. He should be able to at least have a proper training camp for a young monster, like you mentioned. And even with a proper training camp, he's the underdog going into that fight, correct?
Yep.
So
100%.
like at least give him a proper training camp so he can have a chance to pull up that upset. But now you just want to feed him to the wolves on a short training camp. And he's like, nah, I know my limits. Let me at least get a proper training camp to do this. You should give him that because he's done enough. And now you're like, oh, we're just gonna get you out of here. We need to fix this card. So you're right. They need to do something, but I don't know what you can do to give the fighters more leverage in the UFC. I don't know if the more can defect to Bellator, if that would be the way to do it or something like that. But they have to have something to where now you have to have a bidding war, right? With boxers, if they don't have a contract with a certain promotion or a certain platform, they're able to create bidding wars for their fights. And, maybe that's one of the reasons Reach Program ended up on Fight TV because they paid the most for him to be there, even though they did a horrible job of promoting it. They paid the most to have him there. So with boxing, we have to find a way to have more control, but not to the point where boxers aren't getting paid what they're worth. In UFC, you got to have less control, but still get the fights you want to see. It's a hard problem to solve. But like I said, last time you was here, I'm willing to be the boxing commissioner. If there's somebody rich out there who can buy all of the rights to the Zone, Showtime, Fight TV, if they got boxing rights and all the boxing and bring it under one platform, I'll be willing to run it and still give these fighters the power they deserve for putting their bodies on the line. So yeah, I'm glad you shared that, man, because that's dirty. That was dirty.
And hands down, if anybody else gets a title shot before Glover, like sue these motherfuckers. Like that's how I'm feeling like, because that's so messed up. Yeah. And then just real quick, something that I wanted to mention, because as you were talking, it just reminded me of this. The UFC is currently a part of a class action lawsuit, which is trying to get the fighters to be classified as as employees versus independent contractors. They're looked at as independent contractors currently. But think about it like this right now. Have you ever heard of a painter that's forced to have a uniform, that's forced to be subject to year-round drug testing? Like, it sounds like a fucking employee to me, right?
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of it. But a significant thing that they admitted, right? Because they're under litigation. They're asked about these things, and they're trying to make it as transparent as possible that they are not a monopoly, that they do not have monopoly power over MMA. They themselves, by definition, have said that their titles that they offer in each division is not a signifier of who is the best fighter in their division. This is in litigation.
Yeah.
They said basically this is like an employee of the month award. And that gives them the longitude and latitude to put whoever they want in these title fights to say, and when you think about it that way, like, not only are you being exploitative, but you are, and you're outwardly like doing things a certain way to keep it that way. Although I love the sport, and I think honestly for the growth of it, things had to go this way. Yeah. But as far as looking out for the athletes and what's in their best interest moving forward, the writing's on the wall, right? The cavalry is not coming. You already know that this is by design what they're doing to you guys. And in that class action lawsuit, it's included as well that when they sold the UFC, they said, we are currently currently giving 18% of the profits to the athletes, and we do not intend on that changing. That was a point of the sell. That was a point to the investors to say, this is why this is a profitable business. So you can't say that you're confused anymore. Yeah. And, like, this is the truth. They are 100% exploiting all of you guys. And this is just another example of, it don't matter how long you've been tenured here. If we need something, we're going to figure it out, and you'll figure it out whenever you feel happy enough to come back. Crazy times.
That's nuts, man. And 18%. Like a lot of times we hear about like the negotiations when it comes to like NFL, NBA, when they have their collective bargaining agreements. And with like the NBA, they get 50%, the players get 50% of the revenue. And for the fighters to only get 18% is crazy. And it's like how many people on the other side that's getting the 82%? That's like that's
Like nine people. Yeah, it's nuts. And dude, it's not even just, and this is the more jarring part about it too. You mentioned that specifically, that revenue, right?
yeah,
The splits in major sports, they don't just go to revenue, they go to TV deals as well.
yeah,
UFC just signed a multi-million-dollar deal with ESPN. Do you know
yeah.
what percentage of that goes to the fighters?
Zero.
Zero. Do you know how
Wow,
criminal that is?
that's
You know
crazy.
how many ads they got on the fucking canvas? Like
Yeah,
every event, they told their fighters, "We're giving y'all uniforms because the sponsors look too bad on you guys' shorts. We're not gonna allow you guys to have individual sponsors,
yeah,
which everyone was eating off of. To
yeah,
be frank, we're not gonna allow you to have individual sponsors because we want a more uniform look." But you create your canvas to look like a fucking NASCAR driving
yeah,
around with like 80 different ads, which nobody, like the athletes by design are getting 0% of that cut. That's all going to the UFC. Like
wow,
at the end of the day, when it comes to like running a business, like they're doing it 1,000% the way you would want to, right? The way you would want
yeah,
to make maximum profits. But at the end of the day, like the fucking writing's on the wall, and somebody needs to come and fix this because it's only going to keep getting worse. And in a sport where, as cliche as it sounds, you're putting your life on the line every single time you engage
yeah,
in training, not alone fighting, training for the sport. You deserve to be fairly compensated. So it's just crazy. It's the wild, wild west out there, bro.
bro. That's wow. And like I said, we've talked about it before, and I've said that people like you and me, we love this sport. We want to see fighters get paid, the max they can get paid. And we understand it's a business, right? But when you get to the point where you describe them getting 18% and then not getting any of the ad money or any of the TV contract, it's like at that point, it's criminal. Like it's criminal at that point. Like it's no longer smart business. It's like if they were at, let's say it was 40-60, and it's like now you're saying, oh, they don't get any ad money. It still would be bad, but it's not criminal. But at 18%, that's criminal, man. That's criminal. And you think about how much these fighters have to pay the people that train them and have to pay the space that they train in. So by the time they get the money that is the little 18%, they split that with so many other people. Oh man, that makes me upset, man. That's that's bad, man. So hopefully the class action suit does come to fruition with something that changes for these fighters, because some of them don't see another way out. Some of them aren't going to be able to get big deals with Bellator. I don't know what Bellator's numbers are and what they're doing as far as with the money, but maybe they're doing something better, and maybe that's the way for these fighters to have a change and saying, hey, we're going to go with Bellator. Because with boxing, they can go from Top Rank to Showtime to the Zone if they're not under a long time contract, and they can make things happen. And UFC, I think that those fighters need to start doing the same thing, because that's bananas, man. That's bananas. But that's why you're on the show, man, because you always bring the extra, bro. Like we call it land yap in Louisiana. You bring the extra, bro. You bring the you always bring it, bro. So please let the people know, man, where they can find you and where they can find your work.
Thank you so much, man. You can find my stuff at Negron MMA on Twitter, as well as Chris Negron _ in full force, bounce back from COVID like a champ, and ready to put out some more episodes this week. I'm going to be doing another episode of TSG, as well as the MMA archive covering Pride 3. So I'm excited for that. Pride FC, you guys, relax. I know. I got myself a Pride shirt, and I'm like, hold on, I don't think I'm giving the right message here, but all in support for my brothers and sisters in LGBT community. Just got to make it clear that is a fighting organization. That's what I'm talking about here. But yeah, excited to put those out and keep doing my thing with the MMA archive. So thank you again for showcasing me and letting me come on.
No problem at all, man. You always add just such a strong value to the show with your knowledge on football, on basketball, bringing the MMA knowledge. And bringing to light some things that people don't know about, like was our last talk there. So I truly appreciate it. If you enjoy the show, please let your friends know about it so we can get this show to the highest levels of podcastivity. All right. I would truly, truly appreciate it. Make sure you follow me on social media, man. I'm a good follow, giving you, different types of videos. But one I did about Troy Aikman being overrated really got Cowboys fans angry on TikTok. It went viral on TikTok and people went crazy on that one. So if you want to see how people went crazy, go follow me on TikTok and check out that video. And Cowboys fans got nasty mouths, man. Y'all crazy, man. Good thing I'm not sensitive because y'all are nuts. But I'm glad that it got that reaction though. It got people riled up, and that's what that's all that we want. We want people to feel some type of way about our content. So I appreciate it, even though if it's coming with hate. I appreciate the hate that it came with. All right. So until next time, go real, go home.